The reason for number visualization. After doing enough number visualization exercises, you may indeed become a math whiz, but that is not the reason for it. It's just a side benefit. There is a real and more important reason, as you'll see. Let's first talk about symbols and objects. Symbols and objects are two entirely different things. Objects are the concrete reality and symbols are the abstract reality used to represent them. 3. When we do conscious observation, we deal mainly with concrete, everyday reality. When we do number visualization, we are dealing with the abstract reality of symbols. Numbers are the easiest and most common symbols to deal with in modern times because they are quite commonly taught, used, and well understood. There are other symbols used in the process of initiation that are more involved and can perhaps be called higher symbols. They are harder to see and understand, not because they are more complicated, but because they are uncommon in this age. Thus our minds are not trained to comprehend them. These symbols were common in ancient times because back then initiation was the normal means of education. These symbols exist within everyone's mind. They can be seen and understood after a person has reached a certain level of mastering their mind, as well as mastering their ability to visualize. The natural symbols are a complete form of language. They communicate concepts and knowledge in a way that is short, concise, and to the point. Without the symbols, such knowledge would take many years to teach by speaking or writing. The visualization of numbers is one simple way to practice and train the mind to ultimately see the natural symbols. That is the real reason for the exercises. Later on we'll get into more involved mathematics, not necessarily more complicated, but more involved in that it will require more of your attention. For now, try your best to do the number visualization every day. It takes only 3 to 5 minutes a day, and the benefits will accumulate. After several months you'll be very glad you invested those 3 or 4 minutes. In addition, doing the exercises every day is a way to overcome the negative effects of mental laziness and/or lack of motivation. These two negative things are the biggest obstacle to attaining self-remembrance or initiation. A person can never hope to complete initiation if she gives in to the negative effects of mental laziness or lack of motivation. These negative traits can be easily overcome by practice. They themselves gain power by repetition. In other words, the more you give in to them, the stronger they control you. To overcome them, get into the habit of doing the visualization every morning. The more you do it, the easier it will be. It's all about practice. If you find yourself debating with these negative aspects of the mind whether you should do something or not, know that you are very likely to lose the debate. Such traits have 1,001 rationales and reasons why you shouldn't do it. The only way to defeat them is to not enter into a debate at all. Don't even give them a chance by thinking about doing. Simply do it. Try the following strategy for a couple of weeks, and you'll see how powerful it is. Do the visualization as soon as you wake up. Write the numbers on paper the night before, or set up your computer. As soon as you wake up, without thinking about it, spend 3 or 4 minutes doing the exercise. Do this for 2 or 3 weeks every morning, and soon thereafter it will become a habit. You'll no longer even entertain the idea of postponing for no good reason. At that point you may stop doing them in the morning, and do them at any time of day that suits you, and you won't have any problems of procrastination. This kind of practice will benefit not only one type of exercise, but the rest also, as well as your life in general. When the time for your initiation comes, you'll be mentally ready and fully motivated. Update questions 1. I recently came across your website and a lot of the information shared resonated with. I have a few questions. In the 7-year fasting program, what are the guidelines for pregnant women? Would you continue eating every 3 days while with child? Also, I have completed 7 and 21-day fasting programs in the past. Once you reach the point of eating once every 3 days, are liquids okay in between this time? What about water and juices? How strict are the guidelines, etc.? Thank you for your time. Hi. A pregnant woman should go back to eating once or twice or thrice a day. As soon as she discovers she's pregnant, she should start eating once every 2 days, assuming she was eating once every 3 days. Do that for about 2 weeks. Then eat once a day for another 2 weeks, then twice a day for 2 or 3 weeks, and so on until she's back to her previous schedule. Then keep it until after she stops breastfeeding, then go back slowly to the normal schedule of once every 3 days by going 2 or 3 weeks at a time. When you're in the 3-day schedule, or the other schedules before that, juices are okay to drink during the fast. You can start with the heavy juices such as vegetable juices, carrot juice, orange, banana purees, etc. After a few months, cut down on the heavy juices and start taking light juices like apple juice, grape juice, lemonade, etc. The purpose of a fast is to rest the stomach. Digestion requires a lot of energy. That's why people usually doze off to sleep after a heavy meal. That's the stomach's way of taking over their whole body's energy so it can do its work. It doesn't even want the person awake enough to think, because even thinking takes too much energy. So by fasting, we give the stomach a rest, and we take back our energy, and that way the body can use this extra energy to heal itself and do other things without being burdened by the process of digestion, which is constant 24/7 in some people who never fast. Hence even heavy juices should ultimately be avoided. In the end, after you have been on this 3-day schedule for a few years, you can cut the heavy juices and only take light juices between meals. Even then, don't drink the juice all day long. The same applies to water. Use it only 2 or 3 times a day, about 1 glass at a time. Thank you for getting back to me. Do you have a reference or resource regarding the diet/fast, or where can I find medical evidence that the adult body takes 72 hours to metabolize? Would a holistic practitioner or nutritionalist be supportive or familiar with this regime? Also, when will more BlackRoots lessons become available on your website? I'll start posting more updates and questions again a bit later. Have you finished the whole book? Check the internet for any information regarding metabolism, but I doubt you'll find anything about this aspect of it. Scientists don't know this information. They know about the general metabolic rates of foods, but not about that of the poisons in all foods. In fact, most don't even know that all foods contain some amount of poisons in them. If they were to find out that the metabolic rate for such poisons is 3 days, do you think they'd publish information encouraging people to eat only once every 3 days? 10. They'd put the restaurant and grocery and farming establishments out of business. But do a study on the web, you might just find the evidence you're looking for. Yes, I finished the book. Of course I plan to read it again. What steps can be taken if I am interested in learning this knowledge firsthand? I assume that the diet should also be vegetarian. What are the standards for eating meat, and what is a true vegetarian diet? Do the second level. It's designed to lead you to the first knower in you. You can eat a little meat if your body cannot do without it. Don't eat it every day, maybe twice or 3 times a week while you're working on the 7-year fasting plan. Read How to Eat to Live by Elijah Muhammad. It will give you a good idea of which foods are good to eat and which are not. Hello bro, your online book is excellent. I have a couple of questions. It states in the Bible that it is unlawful to commit fornication or to lust after a woman in your heart, who is not your wife. The consequences of committing these sins, as well as others, and disregarding Yahweh's laws, according to the biblical teachings, is eternal damnation and the second death and lake of fire for all perpetual violators, irrespective of persons. So my 2 questions are: do you believe the laws of Moses and the messages about the consequences of sin, damnation, and spiritual death apply to all people, or just the redeeming of lighter races since blacks are the original gods? Is it possible that some blacks can actually experience the lower levels of Yahweh's heathens, even if briefly? I.e. people who reported dying and being either in hell or on their way to hell and coming back from the near-death experience with great fear, a vivid recollection of the experience, and sometimes a complete conversion to Christianity? Thanks again for all your wonderful info. Those punishments you mentioned were directed at the light races. So the punishment of eternal damnation applies only to them. The reason is because with them, such behavior is not an imitation but is rather inborn or natural, so it's near impossible for them to give it up once they get started in it. With black people, it is always imitative behavior, and is easily shed once they enter their natural condition in the mental worlds. So the eternal damnation or second death is really a self-destruction brought on by the fact that they willfully refuse to give up such behavior. All black people, except children, do go to the hells for 3 days after they ascend. Every person has sinned to some extent or another. It's not possible to remove the stains of these sins immediately, hence we are pulled to that place by the desires that led us to commit those sins. So we all go there for 3 days and experience the spiritual fire whose purpose is to cleanse us. This doesn't necessarily mean we will suffer during that time. If a person does not identify himself with his sins, then he will undergo that ritual with quite a detached state of mind, and will see that it's simply a cleansing experience from beginning to end. But if he identifies with it, and believes he is a sinner and not a god, then the experience will cause some suffering. But every single black person always becomes enlightened after 3 days and the experience ends. One question that comes to mind. Is this 3 days the same 3 24-hour days we experience, or is it possible that it's actually 3,000 years in heaven or hell? Because I was told that a day is as a 1,000 years to the Creator. And since we only experience this 24 hours because of our planet's distance in relation to its rotation around our sun, perhaps the heavenly/hellish realm is a planet of a higher frequency or less dense mental substance that rotates further from their sun and has a planet and sun much larger than ours, causing days to be much, much longer. On the other hand, if there is no time in Yahweh's heavens/hells or on that planet, then what reference do we use for the length of days, hours, etc.? Maybe this is why many people believe hell is eternal for all, because from an occupant's vantage point a few seconds here on earth could be experienced as years in hell. Thanks ahead of time. You're right in that part of your analysis. Time in the mental realms is completely subjective. There are no orbiting planets, so there is no way to measure time like that. The 3 days is from our vantage point on earth. If you could see a beloved of yours who has passed on, you would see them enter the hellish realms and then exit them after 3 days. But to them it could be 3 minutes or 3 years, depending on how they interpret the experience. If it causes them suffering, then it will seem like 3 years because, as you know from your own experience, time passes very slowly when one is suffering, but zooms by extremely fast when one is in a state of joy. Another couple of questions that come to mind, and if the answers have been covered in the online BlackRoots science book, please just let me know and I'll gladly look them up. Number 1. Since all blacks upon ascension go to the hell world/s of the mental realm for 3 earth days, subjective experience possibly seeming much, much longer, to spiritually burn off any sin/evil/imperfection, why should black people, who are eternal gods, make an effort while on earth to avoid the pleasurable things that are forbidden in the Bible, like fornicating, lying, adultery, etc., since blacks, who have all participated in some act of sin in their life, are all going to hell, at least for a little while, anyway? Does more/different acts of sin give you more/different types of suffering in hell, or increase your sentence past the 3 days? Or is it the case that no matter how many sinful acts you participate in, you just get 3 days? People who don't make an effort to be righteous and who live a life of willful sin will have a huge problem in the mental realm when they try to get rid of the desires that led them to sin. We all have these desires. In ancient Egypt, they were represented by the god Set. He is the god of desires, and his adversary is Horus, who represents our will to do good. We are in a constant, never-ending battle between these two forces in us. Set always leads us to follow our desires, no matter what they are, and Horus always tries to direct us away from sinful desires and to good ones. This battle between the two gods rages inside every human being in this age. When a person takes the side of Set and rejects the advice of Horus, then they end up identifying with those desires that lead them astray. When the time comes to remove them through the fires of purification, it feels to them as though a part of them is being torn away by force. It's as if someone were to try and rip your heart right out of your chest. The pain would be unbearable, hence the suffering. Hence a person has tried here on earth to balance the forces of Set and Horus, and partake only of those desires that lead to overall good and shun those that lead to sin. Then those evil desires that exist in him are like a foreign substance to him. He welcomes their removal just like a person who has a cancer welcomes its removal by a competent doctor who can do it with little or no pain. That's how it will be for them in the hellish realms. It all starts here on earth as to what attitude each person has towards sin and whether they identify with it or not. Now, as I said before, on earth one can pretend to be what he is not, but in the mental realms it's not possible to pretend. Each one's suffering will be in direct proportion to how much he or she loves the sinful desires. With black people, the lesson is learned very quickly, within 3 days, because these desires are not a fundamental part of our nature. With the light races, it's infinitely more difficult because they are taught from childhood to follow their nature, which is by and large evil. Number 2. I believe it was stated in BlackRoots science that the land of Israel at the time of Herod etc. had a mix of lighter races and blacks in that land. If so, which group was with Moses/Musa when he led them out of Egypt, traveled in the desert for 40 years, and received the covenant/promise from Yahweh/Yacub, basically stating that if they followed all the commandments, including the observance of covenant feast days and Passover, he would be their God and they would be his people forever. And were they led, pillar of fire by night and cloud by day, by Yahweh/Yacub, the creator of the lighter races, via a spaceship? The story of the Exodus as reported in the Bible is a confusion of two stories. One of them is a prophecy about the present Israelites in the West, and the other is a misunderstanding of a historical event that happened long before the Old Testament was transcribed. I'll start with the second one. This is the story of Moses leading the light race people out of Europe into the promised land of North Africa and the Middle East. They had been promised by Yahweh at the time of their making on the island of Pelan that they would be led to the promised land where it was their destiny to rule the world. They first went into the promised land 6,000 years ago. As soon as they got there, they totally rejected Yahweh's teachings and resorted to their true nature. They quickly became very disruptive to the original inhabitants and caused so much mischief that the king of that time expelled them from his cities. That's when they were incarcerated beyond the Caucasus Mountains for 2,000 years. After that amount of time had passed, their savior Moses was born and he went to bring them back to civilization so they could fulfill their destiny. It took him 40 years to march them from the mountains, across the desert, and into the Middle East. During that exodus, he taught them the mores of civilization and the laws of Yahweh that they had rejected long ago. It was also during that time that whenever they picked up their belongings to continue the march after camping for several months, they were indeed led by the angels of Yahweh in a spacecraft. I don't know if you have ever seen a UFO, but at night the energy field that surrounds them gives off light that looks like a flame, or what modern people would liken to neon lights. The ancient people likened it to the colors of a flame, because as the energy increases or decreases, the colors change just like a flame, going through the entire spectrum of reds, yellows, and blues. So the people then called it a pillar of fire. During the day the colors are not so easy to see. All that can be seen is the sun's reflection off its surface, which causes it to look white like a cloud. Hence, even up to the time of Jesus, they were called the clouds of heaven, as Jesus said in Matthew 24:30, where he was talking about Yahweh, the Son of Man, coming in the clouds of heaven in great power and glory at the end of the age. That's the first story of the Exodus of Moses and the Caucasians. The second story was an ancient prophecy about the present Israelites. They will be led by their modern Moses from the desert of self-forgetfulness into the promised land of the knowledge of their ancestors. This exodus will also take 40 years to complete, starting around the year 2010. In that year, the knowledge of Yahweh or Allah will become very widespread among the true Israelites in the West. That will also be a time when large numbers of them will begin returning to the land of their ancestors Israel. That journey will also take 40 years to complete, as it will include the complete rehabilitation of that desert area into a fertile greenery. All this was part of the prophecy. The covenants that Yahweh made were made during the revelation of this prophecy to Moses as well as to the prophets that if they keep the laws of Yahweh, he will lead them back to the promised land, literally the land of Israel, as well as the metaphorical promised land of true self-remembrance. These two stories have been confused and mixed into one in the legend of the Exodus of the Old Testament. Moses did not lead the Israelites out of Egypt, as they were never enslaved there. On the contrary, during their suffering, the kings of Egypt were the ones who offered them sanctuary and protection. Egypt is used in that prophecy to signify the most powerful country on earth, which it was in those days, and which today means America. Number 3. What is the significance of YASHUAHS/Jesus' death on the cross/stake? Was it that through following his exemplary life/words and all the prophets' life/words, Bible/Quran, and moral examples and believing he is the Son of God, the lighter races could have eternal life and not perish? All races could avoid the hell experience through redemption/elimination of sin through believing in his righteous sacrifice/name, or was his death and divine sonship a fabrication/distortion/mix of various historical facts and myths that originated in previous times, like the Book of the Dead/Coming Forth by Day, Epic of Gilgamesh, Babylonian mystery system, paganism, ancient black spiritual knowledge, etc. Jesus did not die on the cross. He was killed by his enemies and then secretly buried by his friends in the regular manner. During those times, dying on the cross was one of the worst forms of torture that a person could undergo. They hung the person by driving nails through his wrists and ankles, then they broke all his joints and left him there to die. He died in the most excruciating pain, as you can imagine. The early Christians thought it would be a good idea to say that Jesus died in this way for the sins of mankind. Many people who stopped to think about this came to the conclusion that one indeed had to be God or the Son of God to willingly accept such a torturous death. This is what today we would call propaganda, whose purpose was to get as many followers as possible. All races could avoid the hell experience through redemption/elimination of sin through believing in his righteous sacrifice/name. Read the chapter on the rapture where I explain why the Christians came up with the lie that all people can go to heaven or receive salvation through faith alone. What many people don't know is that much of the false doctrines that became a part of early Christianity and are still believed to this day were devised by extraterrestrials. They have been directing the course of Christianity now for 2,000 years in order to get it to serve their purposes, which fundamentally have to do with their genetic problems. More questions I have. If Christ did not die for everyone's sins on the cross or stake, should we continue to follow the examples of righteousness of all the prophets and the prophet/Savior Jesus, who came to remind us of who we were, by continuing to obey all the commandments of Yahweh, specifically the one I'm concerned with so much, fornication, or is it okay to be physically intimate/date, when single, until you find the right one to marry? Also, is it immoral to look at a woman's shape/looks in passing, in a lustful manner? Or do these acts, dating in brief, few seconds, staring or looking/lusting at a woman's body, someone you are not married to, result in more sin accumulation and therefore cause more suffering when the hell experience happens, or is just not choosing to participate in perversions, porn watching, lying, hatred, stealing/murder and living a fairly moral life, except for intimate dating/occasional looking, sufficient? This answer applies to both questions because they're related. It's not a sin to look at a woman's body with the idea of sex in mind. This is perfectly natural and is part of the reason why we become attracted and eventually fall in love and get married. Sexual attraction is a large part of it. Now, having said that, looking at women solely for this purpose, with no intent of ever having a responsible relationship with them, is a sin. This type of behavior is what is meant by lust. The sole purpose is to satisfy the sex desire and nothing more. Someone may then say, well, what if I sexually try out several women so I can find the right one? First of all, you don't have to try out women in order to fall in love. Every man and woman knows this. Secondly, you cannot pretend to yourself. Every person knows deep down what his true motives are. In the mental realms, each one is stripped of all pretensions, and their true motives become exposed. If your real desire was simply for sexual pleasure, then this love of sex just for its sake will follow you to those realms, and the suffering associated with its removal will be intense. It should be obvious then why adultery is a sin, i.e. the person is already married, thus his sexual attraction comes with no responsibility toward a marital relationship. For a single man, the determining factor concerning his sexual activity is whether or not he has genuine intentions to marry that woman. Of course, you cannot in a short time know a person as well as you would like, so sometimes you may have good intentions to marry, and therefore feel no guilt about engaging in premarital sex, only to discover later that the person was lying to you or putting up a false front. In that case, it's not your fault if the two of you split up. Your motives remain pure. People being what they are with the tendency to easily give in to bad but pleasurable habits, it should be obvious then why the laws of the ancients lean more towards celibacy before marriage. It's much easier to avoid the temptations of sex if one stays away from it altogether before marriage. Once a man indulges in it, it becomes very difficult to abstain after that. From that point the situation can get out of hand so quickly that one finds himself inventing all sorts of justifications that would not have been necessary had he not put that first foot in the water. In the past few thousand years we got married much earlier than we do today to avoid these pitfalls. But the white man system today makes it nearly impossible to get married at a more sensible age, between 16 and 20 for men, and 14 and 18 for women. The pull of sexual desire is very strong in males, and a man has to give in to it just once to understand this. Hence the ancients taught that one should marry the woman first before engaging in sex. This responsibility naturally leans much more heavily on men than women because 99 times out of 100 women who give in to our sexual advances do so with the pure motive of attracting us to eventually marry them. Their motives in this regard are much purer than men's. The second point is, why do some men stay single for a long period? Is it so that they can engage in responsibility-free sex, or are there legitimate reasons? Again, you can fool everyone in this respect, but you cannot fool yourself. If your reasons are disingenuous, then it means you have a strong love for those desires that lead to sinful behavior, and the suffering attached to their removal are just as intense as the love you have for them. This applies to all the other sins you mentioned. A person who commits them willfully has a love for them, and the suffering and length of stay is in direct proportion to the love for them. There is great wisdom in the teachings of the prophets and saviors of this age. They taught always with an eye to the future, where they knew the laws of purification and balance can cause a great deal of suffering if a person does not prepare himself/herself right here on earth and learn to conquer the desires that can easily lead to sin. To see how seriously the ancient Egyptians took their moral lessons, take another look at the Egyptian Book of Coming Forth. You'll see the individual pleading with the gods of judgment that they did not give in to immorality. They even list all the laws one by one, which are more numerous than the 10 Commandments. These are the laws that helped them to overcome the earthly temptations, thus making their 3-day journey in the underworld much more bearable, or even quite easy in many instances. 3. I have personally witnessed the power of uttering Jesus' name. Why does his name have so much power? And finally, a comment relating to the 3 days in hell experience. I can compare the hell experience, 3 days, to when the body purifies itself of various toxins, foreign substances, via mandrake root, for example. During the cleansing process, the more impurities there are in your system, the more uncomfortable/unpleasant the cleansing experience is, as you feel the toxins being removed/moving through your system. But right after you are completely cleansed, the unnatural/junk foods that you used to crave, at least for a time, are not only not desired but sometimes even repulsive. Because your body no longer wants what is unnatural once it's in its natural/original state. I imagine this is the state all black people will achieve spiritually, no desire for sin, after they are completely cleansed of the accumulated sin with spiritual fire. The power in Jesus' name does not come from Jesus, it comes from you. Remember, Jesus is your brother. He doesn't have any more power than you. This doesn't mean he doesn't have power. He does have a lot of power, but you have just as much. You may choose to use it by invoking his name, others by invoking the names of ancestors, and others by using various rituals, but the power comes directly from us. Your last point needs no comment, it's right on the money. Hi BlackRoots. As a conscious black person, I have noticed for many years that when somebody attempts to do something bad to me, there is usually bad karma that occurs. I had one person die, another in a wheelchair, also one commit suicide, also a person whom said they were conscious started talking bad about our people and showing Uncle Tom tendencies now are suffering medical complications. This was after I told my ancestors that she will be punished. I know with this individual they abandoned parts of their character and left themselves susceptible to illness. Is this the formula of messing with a culturally conscious being? Also, since I know that we are heading into time with natural light that can only accommodate our community and technology will be left behind as the old energies will disappear with YT and his regime. I spoke once with a Rastafarian in Barbados and he told me that we will be going back to horse and buggy. And a black Muslim told me that we will have better transportation than what we have now. Where do you come out on this? As we conscious brothers and sisters head into this new cycle and there is only one soulmate, will polygamy cease to exist? And what is the difference between sexual interaction in the future as compared with now, minus diseases and evils that exist now but won't accompany the new cycle? About the people who do bad things to us personally, I've had the same accidents happen to them also, but never with black people, only non-blacks. Just recently one got a disease in the leg where it had to be amputated. Another lost his job, etc. This has happened many times. Now, the reason it never happens with black people is because I have unconditional love for all black people, no matter what they do. I understand the reasons why they do what they do, so I've never had to deal with what you call their bad karma. But because of my hatred for the light races, bad things always happen to them when they negatively cross my path or try to prevent me from achieving my goals. Polygamy will eventually cease to exist, but this will take a while because brothers are still in short supply due to being incarcerated or murdered by the enemy. So polygamy will continue for a while based on the need to love those sisters who cannot be with their soulmate for reasons beyond their control. I'll answer the question about sexual relations later. Greetings BlackRoots. In response to your last email with concerning karma, there is one major clarification that I have to make. The individuals whom committed suicide, died, and ended up in a wheelchair are all YTS. The fraud conscious sister is the only black person, but I didn't curse that person. I simply told my ancestors this person going to receive an eye-opener which would force this person to rid themselves of the sympathy of the lighter ones. Asa brother, I only care about sisters and will have a family with one. I also, with my consciousness, I have noticed that all other lighter women do not approach me in a sexual manner. I have told my sisters in my circle that it is because I have a repellent against these other groups and don't put my energy to them, therefore they will not approach me. I believe if you constantly seek theer women the chances multiply. Sisters are the only type of women that I find attractive. To me the other women are nasty and try to gain the features of our African queens. Tanning and injections surgically of various parts will help lead to their destruction, amongst other things. They are the Delilah that is mentioned in the Bible whom weakened Samson. They want to take us down with them when they sink. Global warming is one of the things that will lead to their destruction. The point you brought up in your book about some of us will learn lessons for intentionally trying to bleach our nation. Ezra 9 and 10 explains clearly how there is going to be a problem as the strange marriages would have to be reformed when the Israelites, referring to us as the rest are impostors, will be restored. You can't bring those relations over to our golden age. Numbers 36 teaches what you stated as it states there can't be anything left in their lineage because the genes of others are not part of the inheritance. Deuteronomy 7:3 even tells us that Israel must not make marriages with them. Nehemiah 13 and 13:25 tells us how the children could no longer speak the Jews' language. Doesn't that remind us of today's mixed children who take YTS side? No different than in Egypt where they took the lighter side to secure their future. I have done lots of biblical reading to back up my claims, and I see you are well read also in this area. On a different note, isn't Korea with weapons going to be one of the things that destroys the lighter beings since these weapons are going to destroy the environment, speeding up the inevitable? Notice how all the lighter ones are battling each other right now. The Mexico border battle with YT, natives Canadians having standoffs with YT in Canada, Pakistan, Middle East, China and Korea against YT's Babylon Babyland countries, which are G7 countries. And notice how 7 is representing these countries who have wealth, false albeit since what we will inherit will be better, and it looks like it will hurt them in the end since these nations are responsible for the wars and greed in the world. It's in Revelations especially. Hope to hear from you. You're absolutely right, my brother. God has what we call divine love and divine hatred. Our divine love is reserved only for our people, and our divine hatred is reserved only for the light-skinned races. This is hatred without blinding emotions, a very intelligent kind of hatred, such as what you mean when you say you don't give your energy to the light race women. That's what it means to have zero sympathy for the light races. Greetings, BlackRoots. I think I have solved one email question that I sent you concerning transportation. I used my third eye and came to the consensus that since we are heading into a new cycle with new light and the loss of present energies, the transportation would be based on light being travel. Hopefully you can inform me if you feel differently. This email is prior to your book coming out, and I don't know if it is going to be covered, although it possibly can be. I'm glad you are doing a book, and I will definitely read it, as this similar information was exposed to me few years back from Southern Africans before seeing this website. Strange thing is, long before the internet I've always thought of some punishment in the Bible and always believed it pertained to non-blacks. Is that consciousness being alive in one's head but only just needing to be exercised? I have many conscious material and notes that I have taught, and I am planning to eventually write a book myself in the future. I love this information. There are 7 modes of transportation that have always been used. Right now we no longer use them because of the conditions of this age. The highest form is purely mental and instantaneous dematerialization. The next is based on magnetic energies, and the others are light-based and electromagnetic. All of them will come back into use in the next age. The use of each type depends on the purpose and the user's level of initiatory advancement. I hope you've seen the book by now. It includes exercises that can lead you to the first knower in you. Greetings, brother. I've read Black Science 6 on Destiny.com and I enjoyed the information you posted. But there are some questions I have to ask regarding certain subjects. If you don't mind, I would like for you to answer some questions I have so I can have a better understanding of our destiny in the future as black people. When you say black people all over the world are descendants of the 1B8M, does that include quadroons, octoroons, etc.? How is Yahweh the father of blacks, when he created non-blacks, and when non-blacks ascend they go to his realm of heaven? Since blacks in America mostly have a mixed lineage, where is our destination? In 2010 through 2012, what happens to black people born in between March of 1961 and 2012? If blacks were on this planet 78 trillion years ago, does that mean that dinosaurs never existed and was a hoax? If so, how? 5. What will happen to white people in 2012? Will they just disappear? I would advise you to get the full book. Most of your questions are answered in it. 1. Quadroons and octoroons can be black or non-black. By quadroon, people mean someone with one black grandparent. But there are no longer any pure black people in America and other Western countries, so the grandparent also has some non-black blood. It's very difficult to determine race biologically. One has to know the exact biological makeup of all the ancestors back to at least 6 generations and find out how much non-black blood they have. For instance, if a quadroon's grandfather was himself a quadroon or octoroon, then the grandchild is most likely not black, his blood having been diluted beyond the 6th generation of blackness by his parents, and yet some will call such a person a quadroon based on the fact that the grandparent is black, even though there is that much non-black blood. Suffice it to say, if such a person has very strong intuitive identification with black people, that person most likely is black because that intuitive feeling comes directly from his first self. Spiritually, it's a simple matter because only those people who have the mind of God incarnated in them are black. Only the 24 elders know who has the Spirit of God and who doesn't because it comes from them. They know the lineage of each person on earth down to the very beginning, to the B8M original people. Therefore they are the final arbiters of who is black and who is not. 2. Yahweh is the father of black Americans and all people of slave descent because these people are his direct biological descendants. They came from the island of Pelon where Yahweh and the 59,999 Elohim made the peeled skin races. 3. The first black babies having the reverse mutation of our 12 DNA strands were born on March 20, 1961. In 2010, they will reach the age of 49 years. That is the age at which the human body/mind reaches full maturity. They will begin to feel the effects of the 12 DNA in 2010. The children born between 2010 and 2012 will be born with the full spectrum of 12-strand DNA. There will be only a few of these children, as the parents, at least one, will be over 49. After 2012, all black children will be born with 12 DNA. 4. This question is answered in the book. 5. Whites and all the non-blacks will continue to live on earth for another 1,000 years. During that time, the earth will be ruled by Yahweh, and it will be called 1000 years of peace for black people. The non-blacks will have the opportunity to repent during this time. This applies both to those on earth and those in the hells. After this 1,000-year period, the hells will be destroyed. On earth, only a few non-blacks will be left. Most will have died off due to their wars, diseases, etc. that will come soon, within the next 4 years. The ones that are left will die off naturally by the end of the millennium, around the year 3000. After that there will be no non-blacks left on earth or anywhere in the universe. I have one more request. Would you mind sharing with me some exercises on meditation so I can come in contact with my higher being? Does good health make it easier to perform such tasks? I designed the second level of BlackRoots science precisely for that. If you don't have time to do all of it, do only the last 3 lessons, dreams, feelings, and thoughts. Good health is vital to succeed. Greetings, BlackRoots. I read some of your material where you were talking about a spacecraft coming with aliens on board to pick up as much humans as they can for their survival. And then you went on to say that a second spaceship will come and Yahweh will be on board with the Elohim. When and where will these events take place? And how can Yahweh speak to everyone at one time if he's on one spaceship? What should people do in the meantime of these events? Live life to fullest. I'm not trying to be rude by any means, especially if what you teach is true. But I would hate for you to change people's whole perspective on their spirituality. If people take your story to heart, it will be a major disappointment to them if your story isn't true. Me personally, I'm not trying to be one of those people. In this day and age, there are so many people out trying to make a quick dollar any way they can. Seriously, sir, just for my being comfortable with the info you have provided, I ask you to please share with me something that I can do on my own to find out if all you are saying is true. To be honest, I can't afford your book at this moment. I will really appreciate if you do this favor for me. My book is free. You can download it at the following site: www.angelfire.com/planet/BlackRootsWisdom. The chapters Rapture and True Israelites answer your question about the aliens and Yahweh. The exercises given in Level 2 are sufficient to bring you in touch with your first self. The information I provide is not meant to bring fear. It's meant to do the exact opposite, which is to bring comfort and peace of mind. Black people have been assailed for many centuries with all kinds of lies by the various religions and non-religions to the point where they are holding onto straws for hope. These straws, such as the heaven of Christianity, will all break because they are false. Instead of bringing hope, they will bring nothing but despair. My goal is to provide our people with some comfort and truth that they can hold onto until the God of this age, Yahweh, returns to earth. Now, you ask when these events will take place. They will take place between the years 2010 and 2014. First, there will be an increase in disasters and catastrophes on earth. At that point, a false Messiah, a white man, will appear and proclaim himself as the savior of all humanity. We as black people are supposed to know quite easily that he is the false Messiah, because he will have the mark of Cain on him. The mark of Cain is nothing other than white skin. Whenever you see a Messiah come who is not black, then know for sure that he is a false Messiah. This man will work with the extraterrestrial races to prepare the Earth's population to be removed, those who are willing to go. There will be many such people, some black people included among them. Soon thereafter, Yahweh will appear with the Elohim. Your second question is, how will Yahweh communicate with all people at once? This is easy. Notice in my book where I explained that all things that are invented in the world come from inside us. Everything that manifests outwardly is a mirror image of the perfect thing inside us. For example, a telephone is a mirror image of the natural ability called telepathy. A computer is a poor image of the human mind, and so on. Now, modern people communicate with the whole world using satellite television. This invention is a mirror image of the mind's ability to do the same, but more perfectly. A television station can transmit a particular frequency in order to communicate with only those receivers that are tuned into that frequency. Yahweh and his angels can also do this using their minds, and do it much more perfectly. This is how they communicated with the prophets of old, whose minds were developed enough to receive those special frequencies. In those cases, Yahweh used special frequencies because it was not yet time to communicate with the whole world. But now that we have reached the end of this age, the time has come for him to communicate with the whole world. Therefore, he will use a frequency that will be received by the minds of all people on earth. This is easy for him to do, much easier than modern people broadcasting to the whole world using satellite television. It is said in Revelation that every eye shall see him. This means every person on earth will see a vision in their minds. The vision will be the same for all, such that there will not even be a question of it being a hallucination by a few people. Remember that this entire world belongs to Yahweh. Everything that a God creates is in his mind, therefore the whole world has its being in his mind. That's why it will be a simple thing for him to communicate with the whole world at once. In the meantime, live your life with love for your people, and no sympathy for the non-blacks. It's this sympathy for the devils that has led and will continue to lead many black people astray, to the point where some will become victims of the great deception called the rapture. Greetings, BlackRoots. I appreciate the feedback I received from you. What you wrote was helpful, and also reading your response brought more questions to mind. Whatever I ask, please don't take offense. It's just that I have been around the Christine concept my whole life, and that may have some effect on my way of thinking. In your work you are stating that we as black people have morals and are not hateful, but yet you show white people no respect at all by calling them YT and using lowercase letters when mentioning them and using capital letters whenever you write black. In no means am I taking sides. It's just that I understand that every white person on earth isn't bad, and some of them have good morals. Second, when you say Yahweh has angels, isn't that somewhat a Christine concept, and how do they look physically if you know? If what you say about Yahweh creating this world is true, don't you think it's unfair to people who had bad lives, imperfections, and all other sorts of problems living in this world, without ever getting to experience the things they longed for or missed out on just for his entertainment? What the Elohim look like, I described in the CHPT True Israelites, see paragraph 65. I also made it clear that I used the word angels not in the Christian sense, but to mean messengers. The Elohim are equal to Yahweh as gods. They are his brothers and sisters. Don't worry, I don't take offense at your questions. I show the peeled-skin races no respect for a very important reason. Black people have been trained over a period of 400 years of slavery and colonialism to view them as superior people. This is a dangerous deception, and couldn't be farther from the truth. For every up there is down. For every front, there is a back. So also for a superiority complex to exist, there must be an inferiority complex to receive it. One cannot give without another receiving. So when black people view them as superior, they automatically view themselves as inferior. As long as black people are at this stage where they almost worship these people, they will not overcome their inferiority complex in this world. It's not possible for a black person to remember her first self as long as she has an inferiority complex. And it's not possible to overcome the inferiority complex as long as one thinks the whites, yellows, etc. are superior. So I disrespect them deliberately and for a crucially important reason, which is to deprogram black people from this debilitating thought that we are inferior to anyone. This has nothing to do with emotional hate. You were better to call it a divine hate, which is a rational type of hate. Black people are gods incarnate. They cannot realize the truth of this if they believe that there is someone above them, whether that someone is the light-skinned races or the non-existent spirit God. I answered your last question in great detail in the book about why Yahweh made a world where there is evil and some people suffer. It's a very serious eternal purpose, not just his entertainment. Peace. Hello, bro. Q. With all the evil acts, rape, murder, torture, exploitation, etc., taking place all over the world by all people including us black people, original people, when we connect to all 12 DNA strands / all 12 DNA strands are again active in 2012 to 14, will these practices cease / be next to impossible to commit by us black people? Q. Please describe some of the images in the mental realms, plants, animals, trees, mountains, etc., as you have experienced them via rituals, if this is permissible. Discussing the things of the mental world causes a yearning in people that can soon turn to sadness, because it cannot be satisfied. It's safe only in a ritual setting as direct experience. It's not advisable to discuss the details concerning the worlds of our ancestors outside of the ritual space. You'll be rewarded by patience in this regard. The future things of this world, on the other hand, are so close to fulfillment that it's allowed to discuss them. So I will tell you about the coming changes of 2010 to 2012. The effects of the genetic changes will be noticed first by those black people who reach the age of 49 years old in March of 2010, i.e. those born during the spring equinox of March 1961. They will experience a mental change within themselves, what some would call a spontaneous enlightenment. This will come as a result of the genetic changes causing their previously dormant DNA to start being active. This activity will bring them closer to their original self, who has been waiting patiently for this moment in our lives. It is the contact with the first self that will cause the spontaneous self-awakening. 2 years after that, in 2012, the first black children will be born in whom the DNA will be active right from birth. For the rest of the people born after 1961 and before 2012, they will experience the spiritual awakening when they reach the age of 49 years old. Therefore, it's all going to start as a very slow process, affecting a few individuals at a time. It will be highly personal and individual to the point where it will not be generally noticed worldwide. As the years go by, as more and more people reach this state of mind, then the whole world will begin to notice. After a period of about 40 years starting in 2010, it will be so widespread that the whole world will be talking about nothing else. 87. So crimes and the like will continue for the next 40 years or so among black people. As more and more hear of what is happening to individuals, and believe it, then the mental attitudes will change even among those black people who have not yet experienced it. They will see many signs of the awakening if they are aware enough to look for it. The first manifestation of the change will be noticed by each individual as a strong, almost uncontrollable feeling of love for other black people, regardless of who or what they are. They will know for the first time the true meaning of unconditional love for their own kind. The light races will be adversely affected by this change in black people. 89. Their whole power base and successful oppression of black people for the past 6,000 years has been upheld by their ability to come between a black man and his brother and a black woman and her sister. They will notice that their lies and deceptions no longer have the effect of dividing black people and causing them to hate one another. This will mark the beginning of the end for them because they cannot overcome unity. Their power to rule is effective only on those who are divided or are caused to be divided by their clever deceptions and lies. The unconditional love among black people will be caused by the original self in each person being close enough to our conscious mind for us to recognize the self in others. This sudden change in black people, where they love one another even unto death for no apparent reason, will cause a lot of despair among the non-blacks. Those among them who had been blind, or pretending to be blind, to the fact that their whole power structure is based on the division or self-forgetfulness of black people, will suddenly realize that without this self-forgetfulness they have absolutely nothing. They will realize that their world is coming to an end. I was fortunate enough during my education to be exposed to the type of mental and emotional change that will soon be the experience of all black people. There are few people that I met during one of our rites who have this type of unconditional love. It is almost palpable. It has such a forceful power that no one can stand in its way. Anyone who tries to come between two or more people who are in this type of love will be driven insane and completely lose control of his mind. This type of power has been absent among black people for 6,000 years. The present world knows absolutely nothing about it. The only non-blacks who will survive it in the coming 40-year period are those who will stay out of the way or totally yield to it. Hi BlackRoots, I have some questions, and I enjoy reading your book every day since it came out. When our 10 inactive strands of DNA become active around 2010, will we all grow back to 7 feet tall? And will the physique of the black man and women change to a muscular appearance? Will our immediate black family be in the same family with us after 2012, the ones related that live with us, mother, father, brother, and cousins to us now, or even missing individuals? Will all black males and females receive their soulmates if they don't have one leading up to 2010 and 2012? Before I answer your question, I have to speak to my teacher. It involves information that perhaps he would not want me to make public. I'll tell you next week. In the meantime, let me send you a dream sent to me by one of the people doing the second level exercises. He thought this dream was interesting, and I agree. It's very accurate about the near future, considering that the person is only a beginner, so to speak. Dream 2, this was a lucid dream. I was totally aware that I was dreaming. I woke up in a bed that was slightly above another bed with 3 people sleeping in it. Apparently, I had been sleeping in this bed. I saw a set of clothes near the bed. I don't know if they were my clothes or not. I looked in the trouser pocket as if expecting to find something. Just as I expected, there was money in it. It looked just like American bills, except that one of them was a $3 bill. They were all folded. I unfolded the $3 bill, and to my amazement, I read the following words in it: "This is legal tender of Yahweh, 2025. The word Yahweh was spelled just like that. The other bed with 3 people in it was like a mattress on the floor. Fast asleep in this bed was a young girl about 4 years old, a young mother and a small baby, maybe a few months old. The young girl was woken up by my noise as I got up. She looked at me. I waved at her to keep quiet. She smiled. Since I didn't know what I was doing there or how I came to be sleeping there, I didn't want to wake the mother up. I took a look at the baby who was sleeping in her arms. The baby had the most beautiful black skin I have ever seen, just like his mother and sister. I left the room and closed the door quietly. I was now in another room and I saw another door. I opened it and it led outside. It was nighttime with a lot of bright stars. I left the door slightly open because I wasn't sure if it would lock me out. There were so many bright stars that I thought this must be a small town in the country, or if it was in the city, there were no lights to block out the stars. I don't remember seeing street lights. I started walking and saw some ultramodern cars driving by. They looked like future models of modern cars. They didn't make any noise and they didn't touch the ground. They seemed to be flying a few feet above the road. I saw one black man in a small car with what looked like red leather or plastic seats. It was open at the top like a convertible. All the cars were open like that. I remember thinking to myself, it probably never rains around here with so many convertibles. But just then I saw one with a closed roof. I kept walking and saw graffiti on the walls of some buildings. It was in a language I could not read, but I saw one in English, although I don't remember what it said. I think it was the names of people. The dream continues, but this is enough for sending to you. BlackRoots. Here's the rest of the answer to your question. I will tell you as much as I'm allowed to tell. First of all, those who seek their friends, relatives, and soulmates will find them. Communication is going to become very different after 2012. It's going to be more mental. Moreover, it's going to become possible for some people to live up to 1,000 years after the rekindling of our dormant DNA, but the bodies will not necessarily grow taller. Now let me tell you something that has been a secret for 6,000 years. Remember I mentioned that the Great Pyramid was built to have 7 functions, and that one of the functions was to be used as a resurrection machine. I explained one facet of the resurrection that has to do with the transportation of the soul to another star system, in this case to the star Sirius, when Yahweh and the Elohim were transported 6,000 years ago. There is a second facet of the resurrection. Underneath the pyramid there is a large temple. This temple is excavated many feet below ground, and the pyramid was built directly above it. The shape of the pyramid has a quality that lends itself ideally to the purification and preservation of energies, including life energies. If you took a pyramid shape and placed it over a bowl of fruit, for example, and aligned it in the same way as the Great Pyramid, i.e. have its faces aligned with the north, south, east and west, the fruits will stay preserved for many days. The ideal material for such a shape is stone because it practically lasts forever. This quality of the pyramid is important for the temple that exists under it. Inside this temple are the perfectly preserved bodies of the 144,000 judges that lived 6,000 years ago. The judges themselves ascended at that time to unite with the minds of the 24 elders. You may remember I mentioned that when the time for the making of the light-skinned races was approaching, the ancients gradually depopulated the earth of all the perfect people in order to make way for the new kinds of people, those with only 2 active strands of DNA. They stopped having children and the earth's population was reduced by 144 million people every time each generation passed. The last group of people to ascend were the 144,000 judges. They did not die as we die today, i.e. unconsciously. Their death was conscious, as was the passing of all the ancients of that time. In the case of the 144,000 judges, their bodies were not buried and allowed to decay. Instead, on the day of their ascension, the body of each judge was placed inside the temple for preservation. These 144,000 bodies are the bodies of resurrection spoken about in the Bible. They are identical to the bodies of the 144 chiefs and the 24 elders who are still alive on earth today. 107. One of these bodies of resurrection was seen by many people 2,000 years ago after the death and resurrection of Jesus. The underground temple is built of stone. Superimposed on the stone is a magnetic field that completely surrounds the entire temple, as well as each individual body inside. It was put in place by the chiefs, and they are the only ones who can remove it. By doing this, they made the stone harder than diamond. There is no tool that can scratch the stone, let alone move it or penetrate it. This temple was discovered by modern archaeologists in 1936, a decade or so after the discovery of the tomb of King Tutankhamun. Since then, they have been making more and more sophisticated tools to try and force their way through the stone. They have failed every time. Magnetism is the highest substance of the universe. It can be penetrated only by the mind that can replace it with an equally strong and neutralizing field. But like all substances, magnetism also has a wide spectrum just like light, which ranges from below red, infrared, to ultraviolet. Modern scientists only know one frequency of the magnetic spectrum, the kind that is generated electromagnetically. They do not know the higher frequencies, such as the one used in the construction of the temple walls. It is the highest of all the frequencies of the magnetic spectrum and is available only to the chiefs. They think that the stone is just some type of extra hard granite that they can eventually penetrate given the right kind of tools. They have even tried their most powerful explosives to no avail. When Jesus' body was taken from his murderers by Simon, he was in a coma, not dead. In those days, the non-blacks did not understand that a person can be in a deep coma for days without a discernible heartbeat or respiration. To them, such a person was dead. Since they usually buried their dead within a day or two, quite a few times they buried people alive who were in a coma, who subsequently died of suffocation. Now and then a person would rise up from his coffin just as they were about to bury him. This always caused havoc due to superstition and ignorance about the comatose state. Now, Simon was aware that Jesus had fallen into a coma. He took him and laid him in a crypt and nursed and cleaned his body for 3 days until he revived him. After he revived him, Jesus consciously left his body, which then died and was buried in a secret place. The soul of Jesus, with the help of the 2 Elohim called angels in John 20 verse 12, then entered one of the 144,000 bodies of glory, or bodies of resurrection that are underneath the Great Pyramid. Mary Magdalene and others who saw him did not recognize him at first because the ancient body, although it has a likeness to his body of that time, was much blacker, taller, and more perfect. 113. As an initiate, he was able to dematerialize the resurrected body at will. All ancients who had completed a certain stage of initiation were able to do this because of the nature of our ancient bodies. Hence Jesus was able to move from place to place instantaneously, and to enter rooms and buildings without walking through the door. The ancient bodies, with their 12 unified and active strands of DNA, are very responsive to the mind. That is what enables them to dematerialize easily at will. But they can also take on any other mental conditions according to the person's state of mind. In other words, if you enter this body and you still believe in illnesses, you can make it ill with your mind. Thus it requires a clear mind at all times. This takes a while to achieve after resurrection due to the fact that the person lived in a relatively imperfect body for a lifetime, such as our present bodies. Thus it requires that a person must spend many days, up to 40 days, before he gains full control and function of the new body. After that time the body is no longer affected by the imperfections of the previous body that are still in the person's mind. So during the first few weeks of his resurrection, his glorious body took on the imperfections of his previous body, notably the wounds inflicted on it that eventually led to his death. That's the reason it was crucially important that he not suffer any broken bones, as prophesied in Psalm 34 verse 20 and fulfilled in John 19 verse 36. It was customary in those days when an innocent person had been killed by soldiers or a mob, for the murderers to break his bones, according to their superstition, to prevent his ghost from rising and haunting them. This was prohibited in the case of Jesus, and the soldiers were prevented from doing so, otherwise he would have taken those wounds in his mind to the new body, and would have been unable to stand or walk in it for 40 days. After about 40 days, his mind stabilized perfectly. The wounds disappeared and the body returned to its natural condition. I've used the case of Jesus to illustrate the process of physical resurrection that has been misunderstood for over 2,000 years. This same process that Jesus experienced was also experienced by others, such as Elijah. It will be experienced by many ordinary people in the coming few years, all of whom are incarnations of the same gods who were the last judges, who surrendered their bodies 6,000 years ago to be preserved for this very purpose. 117. The 144,000 bodies in the underground temple are in a perfect state of suspended animation, for lack of a better word. There are no biological or chemical processes going on in them, thus no decay. They are as supple as the day they were laid down. When the resurrection occurs, I'm told it's as if a person is waking up after being asleep for about 10 minutes. She is as supple as one who just lay down to rest for a moment. The bodies are preserved for the people who are to become the new judges of the black nation. They are to be the foundation of the new society. Each new society requires a minimum of 144,000 people, 72,000 men and 72,000 women, in order to form. This number is the minimum required for the necessary genetic variety to avoid inbreeding. It is from them that the population will grow until it reaches the maximum of 1b8m. The number corresponds to the 144,000 aspects of life, as each judge embodies one of the aspects. As they begin to give birth to new generations in the coming 1,000 years and beyond, they will rebuild the society of the black nation. Hence there will be 144,000 black people who will resurrect in the ancient perfect bodies. They will consciously give up their old bodies and resurrect in the ancient bodies that are preserved in the temple. When the knowledge of the bodies of resurrection was taught to the initiates of old, some of this knowledge filtered out into the general population of the uninitiated during the times when Egypt was ruled by priests and pharaohs who were of mixed race. They misunderstood the teachings, which were not meant for them anyway. They were meant for those among them who were initiated. Nonetheless, this knowledge filtered in a distorted form to many others. This misunderstanding led to the establishment of the ancient Egyptian practice called mummification. Some of those priests believed that they could resurrect their own bodies if they could find a way to preserve them. They invented many kinds of techniques for preserving the human body, and got so good at it that to this day some of these bodies still survive, although not in any state where they can be brought back to life. Every person who could afford it in those days had his body mummified with the hope that at some point in the future they could be brought back to life. This cult was a gross misunderstanding of the teaching about the true bodies of resurrection that are preserved perfectly without the use of chemicals, but rather by an arrangement of the Earth's magnetic field under the control of the mind, with the help of the preservative quality of the Great Pyramid. As time went on, they realized that the mummified bodies could not be resuscitated. At that point they revised their motives so as to continue to perform this practice, which brought them a lot of riches. They now said that mummification helps faster resurrection in the afterlife, and that became the new teaching. Part of the process of initiation requires that a person should purify her body by proper fasting. At the same time she should train the mind to make contact with all his memories, which will help her to eventually make contact with the original self, who is the self-initiator. At that point, the person will then have an understanding of self and other, i.e. an understanding of God and the devil, the light races. This will lead to a conscious mental resurrection whereby she will eventually attain conscious bodily resurrection. This will be easier to do after the year 2010 when a rekindling of our dormant DNA will occur. Those who have prepared themselves through fasting and mental exercises will be the first to awaken. All this was planned to take place now at the end of the rule of the light races. The mentally awakened and bodily resurrected people will become the new long-lived judges of the black nation. They will increase in population over the coming 1,000 years and beyond. As the judges give birth to many children and the population of perfect people increases, more and more black people will incarnate in the newborn perfect bodies until the population reaches 1b8m, thereby ushering in a new age of everlasting peace on earth. The science of soulmates. A short synopsis. Anywhere, literature, that I can find reliable and true information about the science of soulmates? BlackRoots. One more question. In Level 1, you briefly mentioned the science of complements in dealing with soul mates. Do you have the time to educate me on this subject? Is this information already available to me and I have just missed, or am I failing to see it? Any help is greatly appreciated. I was about to explain the science of soulmates in detail a year ago when I first started posting, but I was advised against it by my teacher. It would not be at all practical to try and apply this science in a Western-type social environment. It involves two aspects of ancient science that are totally absent in modern society. The first is that it requires the presence of what we call a Mohamagidi. This is a person who serves the function of welcoming a new child to the world while the child is still in the womb. In our society we know that the spirit of an unborn child can communicate with Mohamagidi using the mother's voice while she's in a state of trance. Mohamagidi interviews the unborn child and asks her what is the purpose of her visit to our earth. The child, using the mother's voice, will normally give a cryptic answer that usually cannot be immediately decoded. It normally comes in the form of a parable. The person in charge as well as the relatives take note of it and remember it until it's fulfilled. The fulfillment of the message usually comes when another child becomes involved in a situation that clarifies the message in a way that is absolutely beyond question. This can happen with a child in the same village or even far away. When it happens in the same village, it's an easy matter to decode it because the whole village knows about the parables involving each and every newborn. As you can see, this requires the unity and community spirit that is not to be found in modern societies. If the situation takes place in a faraway village where the message has not yet reached, then obviously the people of that village will not be able to decode it. At that point, they will start a widespread search, consulting the Mohamagidi in all the villages to see if they can find help with the meaning of the event. This may take a few seasons, but ultimately the right child is found who is the fulfillment of the parable. Then the second aspect comes into play, which has to do with true ancient astrology. The ancients always noted the starry and planetary alignments at the conception of each child. As a matter of fact, the parents consulted the authorities, Dingaka, who are expert astrologers, before conceiving a child. The Dingaka advised them concerning what time would be appropriate for them to conceive, given their purpose in life and the purpose of the child they planned to bring into the world. True astrologers are able to find these things out for each couple. Now, this is the most crucial of the two aspects, because soulmates are always born when the heavenly alignments complement each other at the time of their conception. In other words, let us say a boy is conceived when the alignments are in a particular way. His soulmate will be conceived only when the heavenly bodies reach another alignment that is complementary to the first. This may occur within a few days of the boy's conception, or after some years. The science of complementary astrological alignments is so involved that I was advised not to go into details to try and explain it. So the science of soulmates requires these two aspects in order to determine with 100% accuracy. Now, let me add that once the two people are brought together, the accuracy is confirmed by their feelings towards each other. They truly love each other, even as young children. This genuine love is always there, and it happens even when soulmates find each other by chance. So even without the science, there are many people who fall in love and then discover that they are soulmates. There are no books I'm aware of that outline the true science. However, there are some that describe what happens after soulmates have met and fallen in love, and using their own experiences, some authors do a reasonably good job of giving a true account of such relationships. However, the best way in this age for people in modern societies is to get in touch with the inner self. Even when you consult guides and diviners, always rely on your own intuition first and last. The 7 functions of the pyramid. I went to the pyramid last July. I'm planning to go again this summer with my husband. I thought it was an amazing structure. And that was before I had read BlackRoots. What are the other functions of the Great Pyramid? Power generator and distributor. Preservation. Transportation. Energy balance. Prophesy. Resurrection. Divine unity. The ancient Egyptian/Ethiopian Empire used a certain form of electricity that was generated and distributed by pyramids. It is different than modern electricity in that the modern type is a low form of electricity that requires transmission wires. All the substances of the universe have a range or spectrum of frequencies. You are familiar with the most common spectrum, that of light. Scientists have named the extremes that they know of this, calling them infrared and ultraviolet. That means if you look at the 7 colors of the rainbow, starting with red, then orange, then yellow, green, blue, indigo, and violet, then the light spectrum starts from below red, infrared, and goes all the way to beyond violet, ultraviolet. Similarly, the other forms of matter also have a range. Solid matter comes in a range of solidity, from soft solids like lead to very hard ones like diamond. Liquids also have a range, starting with thin liquids like pure alcohol or substances such as benzene, to thick liquids like gels. This is true for all the 7 forms of matter through the gases to the ether, light, electricity, and magnetism. Modern generated electricity is a lower spectrum type, barely above static electricity, the type that makes your clothes cling. The ancients used a higher form of electricity that did not require wires for transmission. It was transmitted directly in the ether, i.e. in space, the same way radio waves are transmitted. It was transmitted to the temples, which served, among other things, as receiving stations. So the temples had antennas used to receive the transmission. These antennas can still be seen today erected in front of some of the temples. Modern people call them obelisks. There is one near you in Central Park, New York that was stolen by Americans from one of the temples, and many more that were stolen by Europeans, perhaps the most famous one being the one called Cleopatra's Needle. Now, the ancients had great reverence for technology. To them it was a gift of nature coming directly from the gods, the 144 chiefs of the Black nation. So they did not treat it as casually as modern people do. Today everyone in Western countries has access to electricity, including batteries, and they use it casually. There is no reverence whatsoever for this gift of the gods. The ancients used it only when necessary, including it in the appropriate rituals, and only for projects that were for the benefit of the general society rather than individuals. Other than that, they went about their business the usual way, using ordinary hand tools. For this reason, modern archaeologists claim that the ancients did not have the knowledge of high technology such as electricity because they see the ancient Egyptians going about their business using hand tools and physical labor most of the time. Yet, there are many instances where they have seen the manufacture of certain implements such as stone coffins that were obviously made using some kind of high-speed machinery. They dismiss these instances as exceptions, and so never mention them in their studies and reports. There are many sculptures and other pieces of art found that are made of very hard stones such as diorite, including vases with very thin walls, narrow necks and wide bottoms. When they look at them, it's quite obvious that they could not possibly have been made by hand. They were certainly made using some kind of rotary machine that required electricity. These are the kinds of items that they bury in the basements of their museums because they do not fit their theories and explanation concerning the level of ancient technology. The ancients understood the concept of balance in all its aspects. They understood that balance is necessary in all things, including the use of technology. Even though electricity is to be used to make life much easier, it is not supposed to be exploited to the point where it replaces all other uses, especially the uses of hand tools and physical labor. Such behavior leads to a deterioration of the human body. It discourages the exercising of our muscles using natural activities. Our muscles need natural activities in order for our bodies to remain in a state of good health. It does not help the body to replace natural activities with artificial activities such as weightlifting and gymnasium exercises. The everyday activities of the ancients, such as farming, washing clothes by hand, milling grains, making wine, rowing boats, etc., ensured that their bodies never went lacking for natural exercise and the muscular fitness and balance required for good health and long life. That's the reason they kept their ancient ways even in the midst of technology that was vastly superior to that of the modern day. Every person had to reach a certain level of initiation before he could use it. The technology was not given for free or for money as it is today. It was earned by knowledge and understanding obtained in the rituals associated with it. They understood that all technology has a higher purpose above that of merely making life easy. It lends to the overall balance of the forces of nature. Without this balance, the life of a society will degenerate to one of two extremes: the extreme of greed, where the gifts of nature are used solely for the satisfaction of physical desires with no spiritual value whatsoever. This is what we see with the way the light-skinned people use technology today. The other extreme is that of over-technologization, which leads to over-intellectualization, i.e., giving up the heart for the sake of the head. This is the case with the extraterrestrial races today, who have given up all emotional life for the sake of the intellect, to the point where they have lost all capacity to love or to empathize. These two extremes illustrate the end result of the unbalanced use of the gifts of nature. Knowing this, the ancients were able to keep using high technology for thousands of years without the harmful effects we see today, such as the ecological disaster that is being foisted upon Mother Earth by the light-skinned races, or the genetic deterioration that comes as a result of losing one's capacity to feel emotions, such as is being experienced by the extraterrestrial races. 2. The pyramids were also used for the preservation of life forms, or the function that has been attributed to Noah's Ark. Periodically, it becomes necessary to preserve life forms on Earth, both of animals and plants, so that they may continue after certain events that devastate the Earth during its periodic cleansing. I will talk more about this function and events at some other time. 3. Pyramids are also used for space travel. This requires the manufacture of a monolithic pyramid. This is a large pyramid, much larger than the Great Pyramid, that is made of a single stone. The stone is obtained in space from among the debris of large rocks that orbits alongside the planets, that are called asteroids. When our first ancestors came to Earth from Sirius, they used 12 such pyramids, each one occupied by 12,000 men and women. They landed the pyramids at 12 different locations on our Earth that were the energy nodal points of that time. The pyramids remained there for a long time in the far, far distant past, trillions of years ago. Such pyramids are always used when large groups of people leave to settle a new planet. We will see their use again here on our Earth in the near future. 4. Pyramids are also used to balance the Earth's energies. They are placed at the 12 primary nodes of the Earth where space energies enter our planet. Every inhabitable planet receives energies from other stars in space that are essential for human and other life. These energies must be balanced as they enter the nodal points, otherwise they could upset the Earth's magnetic shield. The Earth's magnetic shield is crucial for keeping out things in space that could cause harm to the planet, such as large meteors and harmful rays. Our Earth and other planets in our solar system are still bombarded by such things because our solar system is still evolving. They will cease when the entire solar system reaches a state of perfect stability, where all its energies are in perfect harmony with the energies received from outer space. 5. The Great Pyramid also acts as a prophetic book of stone. It's constructed in such a way that it tells the future story of the age we are in. Every king or queen who rules the earth builds a stone pyramid as part of their ordination. In its construction, they write the future of their 25,000-year reign. They do not write it in hieroglyphs, but in the sizes and types of stones used, and the way they are placed, as well as the way the chambers are constructed. A person who is initiated into its mysteries can read the future events of the earth from it. 6. It is also used as a resurrection machine. I've already described the two facets of resurrection for which the Great Pyramid of Giza is used. 7. Lastly, and most important, the pyramid is used to facilitate divine unity during rituals. This is a function that belongs to the 24 elders. Update questions 2. Do you give lectures or seminars? I'm not allowed by my teachers to come out in the open. I was given permission to present the knowledge on condition that I remain anonymous. For that reason, I do not give public presentations or initiations. It is crucial for the success of my mission that it should remain a complete secret until there are enough people with the knowledge. I think you'll understand. Nevertheless, I do give initiations in the secret world we call De Toro, what would be called the dream world. The purpose of the dream exercises of level 2 is to train people to start dreaming consciously and lucidly. When this happens, I have the power and the permission to visit you in your dreams and communicate with you. I strongly encourage people to do at least the dream exercises of level 2 if they cannot do the whole course. This increases the chances of our coming together in communion in that secret world. There are already many people that I contact this way, and I encourage more and more as we approach the end of this cycle. I feel honored to receive an email from you, my brother. My wife and I will be ordering a few more books in the next couple of weeks, as we intend to start a book club on the book. We are personally hand-picking the participants. Let me know of your thoughts on this idea. When I presented it within to the elders, they approved. I wish you all success, and I am committed to helping you complete your mission. This information is the greatest that I have ever read, and I do read, keep on, keeping on. That's an excellent idea. I totally approve. Remember that I'll be available whenever possible to answer questions, so do not hesitate to ask. You go with the full blessing of the elders and ancestors. Also, I'd like to know if there is anything that you want me to do, not to do, or especially emphasize in regards to starting the book club around the book. I just want to make sure I don't misrepresent you or the teachings, etc. Here's my advice on 3 important points before you begin. State the purpose of the book club. Write it down as plainly as possible so that if someone asks you why did you form the book club, you can answer with full confidence. If there is more than one purpose, state each one clearly. State clearly what you hope to achieve within a reasonable amount of time. If you hope to achieve it in stages, state the aim for each stage. State what you hope to attain at the end of it all. Assume that all will go well until you reach your goal. What is that goal? The 3 points are more or less the same, all meant to elicit your intent and to look at it from 3 points of view. Be flexible. Don't make these your final word, as things become dynamic when other people are involved. But you need to state these clearly at first to have a foundation to work from. As soon as you have them, then we can discuss what is important to emphasize and so on. Don't hesitate to discuss them with me if you want. Here's what I would suggest you emphasize in the book club. The first 10 facts. God is the divine unity of all black people. Divine unity is a state of mind where there is no separation, where all black people know themselves as one. This one is the eternal God. God is equally man and woman. God separated into one b8m black men and women who created the universe. 144,000 ancestors came from the star Sirius 78 trillion years ago and settled on our Earth. Our Earth was inhabited exclusively by black people until 6,000 years ago. 6,000 years ago, a God by the name of Yahweh was born on our Earth. He made the non-black races out of the recessive germ of black people. For the past 6,000 years, black people have been in a state of self-forgetfulness, not knowing who they are and who the devil is. This cycle of evil is preordained to end between the years 2010 and 2014. When the cycle ends, black people will reawaken from the state of self-forgetfulness. After the reawakening, the God of this age, Yahweh, will return to rule his world for 1,000 years. Black people of slave descent are the true Israelites, the chosen people of Yahweh. They will be at the forefront of forming a new society under the rule of Yahweh, which will prevail in peace for 1,000 years. The non-black races on Earth and off Earth will survive for only 1,000 more years, after which their species will become permanently extinct. Those among them that recognize Yahweh as their God and Maker will continue to live forever in Yahweh's heavens, which are in his mind. The second 10 facts. By nature, black people have 12 strands of DNA, which correspond to the 12 original tribes of the black nation. Our ancestors deliberately stagnated 10 of the 12 DNA, and they correspond to the 10 lost tribes of Israel. The 10 lost tribes of Israel were found in 1912 by the seventh and last Mahdi, Farid Muhammad, who announced it through his messenger Elijah Muhammad. 49 years after he found them, the 10 inactive strands of DNA in black people began to vibrate back to activity. This happened first in black children who were conceived on June 21, 1960, and all black children conceived thereafter. The reactivation will mature on March 21, 2010, leading to the first general reawakening among black people who reach the age of 49 years old on that day. The reawakening will continue for all black people who reach the age of 49 years old thereafter. All black children who will be conceived on or after March 21, 2012 and born on or around December 21, 2012 will be born with fully active 12 strands of DNA. The reawakening will cause black people to know who God and the devil really are. There are 144,000 perfectly preserved bodies of resurrection in a temple underneath the Great Pyramid of Giza. After the reawakening, 144,000 black people, the so-called elect, will be resurrected consciously, without dying first, into these bodies. They will become the new citizens of the perfect society. They will give birth to perfect children and increase the nation's population. All black people will eventually incarnate in these newborn perfect bodies until the number of the nation reaches 1b8m. The 144,000 elect will come from any black society on Earth at present, although the vast majority will come from the modern black descendants of slaves. Add more facts that you regard as important. Peace. Hello, bro. Regarding the countless trillion personalities that we have been in the past, and other previous universes and this one, can we communicate with / ask questions of them somehow? Where do they reside now, and where will this personality we are now reside after we are reborn? Various New Age doctrines mention subtle bodies like an etheric body, mental body, astral body, soul body, etc. Please clarify these in relation to the conscious mind/personality and the unconscious mind/first self. Thanks ahead of time. 1. In essence, each black person is the original self. Every personality that is born, including the personality that you are now, is like a garment that the first self wears. Just like you put away the garments you are not using, the first self also puts away his old personalities in his mind. So they are all still alive and conscious, but they live in the mental world in the custody of the 24 elders. This home of the ancestors is called heaven in ancient scripts, not the new heaven of Yahweh, but the eternal heaven that has always been. 12. It's possible to communicate with them via the first self. If you were to succeed, one way such communication could manifest would be for you to become conscious of yourself as one of those personalities, who are really your spiritual ancestors. What would be happening would be that you as the first self decides to wear that garment, or that personality. That is the most efficient form of communication with our spiritual ancestors. It usually only happens during guided rituals. Another way you could communicate with them is through dreams. You could actually meet one of them in a dream and talk to them as you would to any living person, because they are real and alive. 13. But by far the most common way is through intuitions and inspirations given to you directly by your first self. The first self is the culmination of all those trillions of personalities, and embodies each one of them individually and all of them together, because the self is the essence of divine unity. By practicing listening to the first answer to your questions, you can learn to ask them questions and receive clear answers. 2. We have a total of 12 bodies, including the body of flesh and blood. Some of them are physical bodies, and the rest are what could be called spiritual bodies, for lack of a better word. New Age doctrine mixes them all together without distinguishing between the physical and the spiritual. Nonetheless, our physical body of flesh and blood is the primary body of all the 12. It is the culmination of all the rest in the sense that all the other physical bodies are less condensed versions of the flesh body. The spiritual bodies, on the other hand, exist because of the flesh body. In other words, they use the flesh body in order to manifest, just like God uses the flesh body to incarnate. There are 7 physical bodies. The first and most subtle is the magnetic body, then the electrical body, then the light body, and the etheric body. In some ancient writings, these 4 bodies are lumped together into one called the body of fire, just as the corresponding universal substances are all together called the fire substance. These 4 are followed by the air body, then the water body, and finally the earth body. So the ancient Greeks, for example, called the substances water, earth, wind, and fire. Fire, as I said, stands for the 4 higher substances. In addition to the physical bodies, we have 5 spiritual bodies. The most subtle is the mental body, followed by the body of will, then the emotional body, then the body of desire. New Agers call it the astral body or the animal body, and finally the body that is made up of our actions. New Agers lumped 3 of the bodies, emotional, will and action bodies, into one that they call the soul body. As you can see from their names, these 5 bodies represent the spiritual activities of each individual, and are formed by those activities. The mental body is formed by all your thoughts, the will body by all your intentions, the desire body by all your likes and dislikes, and so on. Thus they depend directly on the physical body, and cannot be made until the physical body is conceived. In other words, the person must be living as a flesh and blood person before his spiritual bodies can be formed. New Agers and Eastern mystics teach the false concept that these bodies came before the physical body, which is clearly impossible. The physical body of flesh and blood is the true temple of God, the one in which He creates everything else. You know, the last time we spoke I was so grateful to actually have received a response from you that I was overwhelmed and forgot to ask some questions relating to the greatest book I ever read. If the white man created the aliens, especially the Greys, why do they, the Greys, appear to have a superior technology compared to their devil parents, the white man? 1. It should not be surprising that the light races created beings that are more intelligent than they. They do this type of thing even today, creating computers that are getting smarter than they are. Black people would never do such a thing even if we wanted to, for a simple reason, i.e. black people have maximum intelligence. And yet, we desired this very experience of creating something that is more intelligent than God. Because it's impossible to do it outright, we went about it the roundabout way by suppressing our own intelligence through mental self-forgetfulness and physical deactivation of our perfect DNA. Even then we still could not do it. So we made beings who would, namely the light races. Now, black people have technology that far surpasses that of the extraterrestrials. But all our high technology is controlled directly by the mind. We don't have any type of technology that can surpass the abilities of our minds. Anything that even our highest technologies can do, there are initiates who can do the same and much more, using only their minds. But we still use technology because the individuals in our society are at varying levels of initiation. All people will eventually reach the highest level where the use of technology is no longer necessary. There will come a time when even the non-blacks reach such a high level of knowledge and mental control that they no longer have need of technology. But that will happen in the mental realms. As long as they are still in the universe, for the coming 1,000 years, they will still need it. The reason the light races have not been able to advance as far as the extraterrestrials technologically is because of their innate greed. The ETs are a different species of evil beings. Their evil nature manifests itself mainly as cold-heartedness. They have sacrificed all emotion and empathy for the sake of intelligence. Thus they are very unbalanced in this regard. This, in fact, is the reason for their fast deterioration, because the human body needs a good balance of both the heart and mind for perfect health. The light races, on the other hand, have their evil nature manifesting mainly as greed. They sacrifice even intelligence for the sake of greed. This is illustrated very clearly throughout their history in the way they choose their leaders. They perfected their system of choosing leaders that they call democracy, which started millennia ago during the reign of the Greeks. This system is so evil and unnatural that it should properly be called democracy, or even demon crazy. It's a system that is perfect for the ascendance into power of the most corrupt and greedy members of their society. It caters to those who can deceive and exploit their fellow humans the most, and are the cleverest when it comes to cheating, stealing, and deceiving. The entire history of these races is pockmarked with example after example of such people ascending to power and doing everything they can to vilify and demonize those among them who are the most intelligent and sensible. Such sensible people are highly undesirable in a culture of greed because they care more about uplifting the entire race, and not just themselves. That frame of mind is anathema to the powermongers. They hate nothing more than the so-called social reformers, because they threaten their greed-based power, which caters to only a small minority. Add to that the fact that their system has been thoroughly infested by a whole race of parasites who produce nothing to help commerce, but instead have invented a system of exchange called money, which they use to insert themselves between hardworking producers and consumers. These money changers have no use in society's commerce other than to intercept products before they reach their intended consumers so that they can inflate prices and make profits that are wholly undeserved. As if that were not bad enough, these bloodsuckers also wedge themselves between creative artists/entertainers and their markets, calling themselves agents, for the sole purpose of using their evil money system to skim profits off the top, while contributing absolutely nothing. They have devised a very clever method of blocking the way so that no one can reach their clients unless they go through them. This group of parasites, overrepresented by Jews, has succeeded so well over many centuries as money changers that today it's almost impossible to do business without their mediation and price inflation. A system like this has no chance whatsoever of reaching technological prowess. Maximum technological advancement comes about only when said technology is for the benefit of the majority, not the privilege of the minority. In a democratic system, any technology that would benefit the majority, by its very nature removes power from the control of the greed-driven minority, and is thus opposed at every turn. There have been countless moments of inspiration where the Elohim have given these races ideas and dreams and visions that could have lifted them up to the same level of technology as the ETs, but such ideas have been squashed and sometimes even ruthlessly suppressed by vested interests. And this is not to say only a minority of the races are greed-driven. In fact, the vast majority of them are the same way. They are prevented only by circumstances. Given the right opportunities, they would ascend to those positions and carry on exactly the same way. In the dark of night, when they're alone, they vent their envy and curse their God for not having them in those positions instead. The truth of all this has been borne out time and again by the back and forth exchange of power between the so-called conservatives and so-called liberals, each group hardly being able to await their return to power so that they can get their chance to lord it over the masses. These people were taught the correct and divine form of leadership, which is a kingdom or queendom based on ascendancy to the throne by initiation. They have corrupted this knowledge and abused the practice of this divine system of governance to the point where the masses overthrew their corrupt kings and replaced them with various evil systems down the ages until they culminated in the present system of democracy, which is the pinnacle of evil leadership. The extraterrestrials, on the other hand, even though they are heartless and cold-blooded, have nonetheless seen that the best system of governance is to allow those among them who are the most qualified in terms of knowledge and wisdom to lead the rest. Through knowledge and wisdom accumulated over 4,000 years of experience, they have been able to far surpass their own progenitors, who are still stuck in the Dark Ages, even though they regard themselves as the most enlightened specimens to ever grace planet Earth. In light of all that you have said, do the ETs pose any threat to us, spiritual, mental, and/or physical? If so, what is the precautionary measures we should take? After hearing your insight, I have decided that I don't want to be victim to anything that I had the capacity to defeat. The ETs rely on deception to get people to cooperate willingly. Once you know their deception, you have nothing to worry about. They cannot force anyone to do anything against his or her will. Means the Most High Black God. You are the first self. These questions by these people in the posts are your beautiful way of teaching us, the lost found. This is the new book that Elijah taught would come. Buying the book as opposed to downloading it is a ritual, a revelation of personal faith. It is so profound. I am beginning to read a second time. This time I will be definitely clear on the magnetism and the other 6. You are the Most High God. I am not here to teach, but to remind those who have forgotten what I myself have remembered. Brother BlackRoots, you have mentioned all the science, but not philosophy. Can you talk about it? 33 Most of the speculation in philosophy is based on sheer ignorance, so I don't concern myself with it. But I will sum it up in a few lines. Philosophy. What is philosophy? It is the knowledge of the purpose of creation and the purpose of life. What is the purpose of creation? It is for God to separate into individual black people. What is the purpose of life? It is for individual black people to unite into God. I wanted to ask you a question regarding Yahweh. Where is his soulmate? What is her name? Why don't you mention her name in your writings? Or was it Yahweh's creation alone? If somehow I have missed these things in your writings, please direct me to it. While I believe that I have read all that you have written, I may have looked over these things. Yahweh's soulmate is with him. They always create together. Her name is also Yahweh. You may be surprised by that, but read again the chapter on his name. The name Yahweh is really a title. Although it is truly his name, it is true only for this cycle, but it will remain true forever for his creatures when they gain everlasting life in his heavens, because to them that is his eternal name. To us black people, that is not his eternal name, because for us eternity starts in the past that has no beginning. So his eternal name is known, as well as hers, but they cannot be mentioned during this cycle. Neither can your eternal name be mentioned, or that of any black person, because these are names of considerable power. They are used only when we are in our natural state in our perfect bodies, or during this cycle, only in certain rituals. Now, the reason his soulmate is also Yahweh is because Yahweh means of the light-skinned races. In his case, the full title is Kosi Yahweh, meaning king of the light-skinned races. In her case, it's Kosihati Yahweh, meaning queen of the light-skinned races. A while back you posted an update. The dream was shared to you from someone who you are helping to remember. The person's dream was pretty simple. They awoke in a small room and there was a woman and a small girl sleeping on the floor. The two ladies both had smooth velvet black skin. He said we went into the pocket of a pair of jeans that was draped over a chair and there was a $3 bill in it and the bill said something to the effect of legal tender of Yahweh, but it was spelled different. This isn't the whole dream. I don't want to make this email too long, so I'm not putting down everything I remember. You said his dream was pretty accurate. Do you remember what you meant by that? How long will money be around? After YT is gone, in another 1,000 years or so, will we still be addicted to money? When the major events happen within the next 7 years, will money still be needed? I'm asking because I am tired of it and I know that it is not necessary on any level of life. So basically, when will money cease to exist or be depended on by the black masses? I'm not looking for a date, unless you know what that date is, but what event will signal the end of the dollar, worldwide? When I said the dream was accurate, I meant the details such as floating cars, the presence of money, the presence of graffiti and other things that he saw. These things will still be with us for a while after Yahweh takes over the kingdom of the world. As far as money is concerned, it will be around as well until the Israelites have settled in their promised land, Israel. As I said, it will take 40 years for them to rehabilitate that desert land to the point where it can support the millions of Israelites who will relocate there. Money will be needed to achieve this. Now, money itself is not necessary in the commerce of black people and was never used in the past. But because the imbalances that have befallen the world at the hands of the white races have involved the abuse of money, it will take the correct use of money to reverse all the harm done. Nature is quite impartial to such artificial inventions as money, but the law of balance dictates that if money was used to cause the imbalance, then money must be used to correct it. Similarly, the ones that caused the imbalance must be the ones that work to correct it. The ones that enslaved must be turned to servitude, etc. In other words, the very evils that caused an imbalance must be turned to good use to reverse the harm done. The reversal cannot be achieved by substituting another thing for that which was responsible for the harm. Jews, more than other members of the light-skinned races, have done much more to put evil into the concept of money. In its purity, the concept of money does not involve any physical money such as coins, bills, checks, or any other monetary instrument. It is purely a mental concept that simply involves the exchange of gifts. Remember that all physical objects that can be bought with money are actually gifts from the earth. There is no physical object that money can buy that does not originally come from the earth in one way or another. The only contribution people make is to add their labor and their inventiveness, i.e. inspiration. Notice that the word invent means to vent in from somewhere else, i.e. to receive an inspiration. There is no invention that comes from individual persons. All inventions are given freely to those who can receive them by the God Yahweh in the case of the light races and by the first self in the case of black people. Taking personal credit for it is an affront to God. Black people understood all these things. So to our ancestors, adding our energy in the form of labor and our inventiveness to improve the raw materials that Mother Earth provides freely was indeed a labor of love, and did not involve any kind of personal claims to the wealth that is inherent in such commercial activities. The wealth contributed by the mind and energy of individuals was considered to be a gift to the whole community, a gift in return for God and nature having provided us the gift that is Mother Earth. Hence for this reason, and because of the clarity of understanding, our ancestors never owned land. They considered themselves as stewards and custodians of the land given to each family by the community and the leaders. They took care of the land and made the necessary improvements, etc., but never ever considered themselves as the owners of the land. The land belonged to the whole nation, and to the tribes and the clans, never to individuals, not even the king and queen. The light races, being blinded by their evil nature, lack the capacity to understand this simple concept. To them such a concept would be what they call socialism or communism. These are evil words created by them and attached as stigmas to what is in truth a divine concept. They simply cannot understand why anyone would be a responsible steward and custodian of a plot of land if he does not reap personal profit from it. It does not occur to them that profit which accrues to the entire community is infinitely superior to individual profit and actually benefits the individual infinitely more. Their selfish and greedy minds do not have the capacity to experience satisfaction from wealth unless there are poor people to provide them with the contrast. They actually ask with a serious face, what's the point of being rich if everyone is rich? In other words, their riches are meaningful only if they cause them to stand above the rest. They have no appreciation of happiness without misery, peace without war, or wealth without poverty. Yet these are the purest experiences when they can be appreciated without contrast. But it takes a pure mind to appreciate uncontaminated purity. Our ancestors called the concept of money dinio. The meaning of the word dinio is gifts. This one simple word encapsulates the entire economy of commerce as it was practiced by our ancestors. The entire concept that is called commerce today was simply called the exchange of dinio. As is the case today with different countries and different regions producing unique products, so it was in the ancient days. They produced enough to take care of the needs of their community, and the surplus was given to outside communities as gifts regardless of their value. In other words, all commodities were valued exactly the same. A pile of beach sand had the same value as a pile of gold. Such a concept would of course be shocking to the modern capitalist or even communist mind. His first thinking would be to go dig up a pile of sand, which he can find for free on a beach, and go to the market to exchange it for a pile of gold. Of course, this would be quite profitable in modern society, where things are valued more for their individual profit potential than their communal use potential. In our ancient society, commodities had zero personal profit value. Their entire value lay only in their communal use. For that reason all food was free. It was unthinkable to the ancients that a person would have to buy food. Things such as gold were valued only for what the planters had planned to use them for. If no gold was needed by any individual or community for an extended period of time, then no gold would be mined. Any that was discovered accidentally had absolutely no value. As a matter of fact, as recent as 2,500 years ago, the ancient Ethiopians used gold to make handcuffs for their prisoners. It was valued for that use because it lasted forever, without rusting. On the other hand, if an inland community had need for beach sand for a particular project, then the sand would have more value at that time than gold. They did not hoard materials that were not included in their plans in the foreseeable future. They had the perfect knowledge that all they needed would always be there when they needed it. It was unthinkable to them to behave in the way gold and diamond companies such as De Beers do today, digging up all the diamonds they can find and hoarding them in order to artificially control their value and price. In their commercial exchanges, they gave all their surplus to the communities that needed it without regard to how much they gave. As long as the community representatives registered their requirements at the central marketplace, then they would get all they needed as gifts even if they gave nothing in return. It was understood that at some other time, they too would have a surplus and would give it freely. That was their whole commerce and economics. All the thousands of books written today on commerce and economics and monetary exchange, and all the lectures taught in modern prestigious universities, and all the degrees obtained from them would be of absolutely no use to the commercial and economic understanding of our ancestors. To them, all money and commerce were summed up in one simple word: dinio. It is the same word that the light races have corrupted to dinero, Spanish for currency, which today stands for greed much more so than it stands for the true and divine concept of money. Greetings, brother African Roots. On this topic, there's some aspects that I'm interested in finding out about. I want to know, when were the extraterrestrials made? I mean the exact / approximate date or period. If they were made before the birth of Moses, which we know was in 2060 BC, then how many years before him? Where did the genetic experiments take place? If they were done in the ancient cities, then was the city of Ur in Sumeria, ancient Iraq, one of these places? I ask that because some figurines have been found from Ur that resemble the extraterrestrial races. See these. http://www.greatdreams.com/reportlawn/ubide1.jpg http://www.biped.info/images/longhit6.jpg http://www.biped.info/images/longhit_new2.jpg http://www.mars-earth.com/ancient/br s/image07.html http://www.mars earth.com/ancient/british_museum/artifacts/image07.html http://www.mars-earth.com/ancient/br s/image10.html http://www.mars earth.com/ancient/british_museum/artifacts/image10.html http://www.mars-earth.com/ancient/br s/image52.html http://www.mars earth.com/ancient/british_museum/artifacts/image52.html. These are clearly distinguishable from depictions of humans and the anthropomorphic Anunnaki, the Sumerian equivalent of the Elohim. See here. http://www.mars-earth.com/ancient. Are there any historically known names of people or individuals that were directly involved in these experiments, or even just names of rulers of that period and place? Also, were all the pale-skinned races involved in the experiments? Or was it just members of one particular race, for example the first or Hellenic race, Greeks, Romans, Ionians etc., who would naturally be the first to practice such sciences since they were the first to be civilized by black people? What of the monstrosities that were made as failed results of the experiments? Are they being encountered today by people in remote areas, and are they the creatures that we hear about like Chupacabra, Yeti etc.? Some say that the alien races also inhabit deep places under the earth. Is that true, or are these subterranean dwellers some other type of beings? One more thing, is it true that the extraterrestrials have attempted to wage war against the Elohim/Anunnaki? There's some legends that I've come across that suggest that they did. Good to hear from you again, brother. The genetic experiments to make the three extraterrestrial races started about 300 years before the birth of Moses. After many trials and errors, they were finally successful around the time of his birth. Their success was due primarily to the intervention of the Elohim. The monstrosities that came from these experiments came only at the hands of the races when they attempted to create the new beings without the help of the Elohim. And yes, all the races were involved. Bear in mind though that it was done in secrecy, so only a few hundred people were involved at any one time at any one location. When the Elohim intervened, it took only about 100 years to perfect what had already been produced for the 200 years leading to that point. After the extraterrestrial races had matured and left the Earth, the experiments still continued, done by the races, and are still being done to this day. Note also that such experiments are also being done today by some Africans, so-called witch doctors, but for different reasons. Throughout their entire history of the last 4,400 years or so, they have never ceased to do genetic experiments, from as simple as crossbreeding compatible animals, to more complicated ones of trying to crossbreed non-compatible animals and plants. They do them mostly in secrecy. The monsters that they produce are usually quarantined, then destroyed when they prove to be complete failures. But now and then some creatures manage to escape their confinement, and when they are able to reproduce, they find hiding places in some inaccessible parts of the earth, and continue their lives. That's how the beings called Yeti, Bigfoot etc. came about. These are not quite human, but they are very close. Hence they are much more intelligent than other animals. They have thus far managed to elude their hunters, and they live in family units or small clans in different parts of the earth. Others, such as chupacabra, usually do not last long because they are very abnormal biological specimens. They are sometimes able to reproduce for 2 or 3 generations and then die out. So now and then such creatures show up for a time, then disappear, and others of a different kind take their place as these people continue to experiment. Now, the actual experiments where the Elohim took part to successfully produce the ETs were done in 3 different locations, one in the Middle East, another in the area near the Adrian Sea where Greece and Turkey are now located, and the third in Central America. The reptilian beings were produced in Central America, the insectoid beings, greys, in the Middle East, and the mammalian beings in that part of Europe where Turkey is. The names of the Earth race people involved in these experiments are none that you would recognize. They are not recorded anywhere in known history. There are no alien races inhabiting large cities under the earth as some claim. The only such places that exist are temporary bases constructed by the ETs as well as bomb shelters constructed by the governments of various nations. The largest such shelter is located under the airport of Denver City in Colorado and spans several miles in size, located almost a mile deep. It was constructed as part of a large natural cavern. Such caverns are innumerable all over the earth, being formed when volcanic lava is emptied from them by natural earth movements, or when large amounts of gas or oil are extracted. They locate these natural caves by earth-penetrating radar, and then dig tunnels leading to them, where they then modify them and make them livable. Now, all these temporary shelters will not help to save the lives of those who will hide in them, because when large earth catastrophes occur, such as the ones that are soon to come, some of these shelters, even though they are located on high ground such as Mile High Denver, will be lowered below sea level as other parts of the earth are raised by earthquakes, and will eventually be flooded. Many of the people who think they will find safe shelter in them will be quite shocked when they are drowned. The claims by some people that they have seen large cities, even entire countries under the earth inhabited by strange underground races, are simply products of their imagination. When they enter certain parts of the earth underground where there are strong magnetic effects, their brains are affected, causing them to hallucinate imaginary scenes of underground cities. Look carefully at their claims, and you will not find anywhere a group of people saw it together. It's always single individuals who make these reports, which is usually a sure sign of hallucination. This also happens above ground in certain areas of the earth, such as the area near Florida called the Bermuda Triangle. There are very strong magnetic fields there whose effects on the brain are not yet understood by modern people. This results in hallucinations, loss of the sense of time as well as direction, such that many people do get lost there for many days without being aware of the passage of time. Some never recover from the ill effects and lose their memories. There are many such people who then wander into strange towns and cities having totally lost all memories of their personal history and live the rest of their lives without ever recovering. They are then reported as lost or disappeared. On your last question, the Anunnaki are not the Elohim. They are a race of human-looking, now extraterrestrial, beings that remained on the earth for about 200 years after their appearance. They colonized a part of the Middle East near Iraq and Iran, and they used the people who lived there as servants. There have been wars between them and other extraterrestrials, some involving nuclear bombs. The Elohim expelled all the ETs from the earth shortly thereafter. They continued to fight with each other on and off for a short period, but soon stopped when they all developed weapons with which they could totally annihilate each other. So they have fought with each other in the past, but never with the Elohim. The Anunnaki permanently left the earth after their prolonged stay and have not returned since. But they will be back along with the rest of the ET races in the near future as the cycle winds to an end. I believe you stated that the Elohim and the Anunnaki are not the same. Could you elaborate on this, please? For I have thought they were one and the same. Hotep. The Elohim are a group of 60,000 people that Elijah Muhammad mentions in his teachings. They are the creators of the 4 light-skinned races, having created them on the island of Pelan 6,000 years ago. Their leader was a god that Elijah called Yaqub, whose real name is Yahweh. The word Yaqub means big-headed. They are not angels in the Christian or Islamic sense. They are original gods, black men and women. The Anunnaki are a group of human-looking extraterrestrials who lived on the Earth about 2,000 years after the Elohim left our Earth. They left the Earth to go to the star Sirius, the home of our first ancestors, by a method of ascension that I describe in the chapter of the book BlackRoots Science called Ascension. Regarding the reawakening in the year 2010. From what base is your estimation from? For I have heard several predictions regarding the topic. In addition, are you familiar with the gland, bathrothery, to be replaced to allow proper functioning? My estimation is based on the natural law of maturity, which applies the same way to the human body as it does to spiritual ideas, being based on the number 7. Spiritual ideas go through the process of conception, birth, and maturity just like the human body, but their maturity occurs in the subconscious mind of the entire nation of black people. Similarly, spiritual ideas that pertain to the non-black races occur in their subconscious mind that they call their collective unconscious. A certain spiritual idea was born in the subconscious mind of black people in the year 1912 and came into physical manifestation in our bodies on the day of the spring equinox of 1961. It started the process of regeneration of our glands and our dormant DNA, which will reach maturity on the spring equinox day of 2010, which is a period of exactly 49 years. Here's a quote from BlackRoots Science from the CHPT, The True Israelites. Shortly before Fard's arrival in America, there began a new reverse mutation in the genes of black people. All biological changes on Earth are the direct result of the thoughts of people. When animals and plants mutate into new forms or functions, they are simply reflecting the state of mind of the people on Earth who happen to be wielding that influence, which directs the biological life to mutate and evolve in a particular direction. When the true Israelites were found, there was great joy in heaven among Yahweh's angels, as well as on earth among those initiated into the spiritual events of our earth. The joy that flooded the subconscious minds of all black people when Fard Muhammad's mission was revealed for the first time among the initiated elders in 1912 was so great that it reverberated throughout the entire black nation and caused the beginning of a reverse mutation in our deteriorated genes. Over the following 100 years or so, starting in 1912 until 2014, the 10 inactive strands of our DNA will become active again. After a period of 49 years since the beginning of the reactivation, the first group of genetically different children were born on Earth. This happened on the spring equinox day of 1961, spring in the northern hemisphere. Since about March 20th, 1961, all black children born have been different than all the previous generations of the past 6,000 years. The reverse mutation is progressing steadily in their bodies as they grow, and will reach a definite plateau when they reach the age of 49 years old in 2010. In that year, the 10 formerly stagnant strands of their DNA will begin to vibrate back into activity. This Bermuda Triangle, as well as its counterpart in the Pacific, the Dragon's Triangle. http://www.mysteryMag.com/earthmyste.d =$75$RDD=197. Do they have something to do with the submerged cities of Lemuria and Atlantis? So are these Sumerian depictions portraying the Elohim or the Anunnaki? I ask because the paintings and carvings show dark-skinned, coily-haired beings with features just like those of the Sumerians themselves, who we know were black people. Wouldn't that indicate the beings being portrayed were also black, quite unlike the mammalian extraterrestrials, who should look more like the pale races? In the above relief, the symbolism of the water bucket and pine cone seems clear-cut enough. The pine cone represents the pineal gland and the water bucket symbolizes Aquarius, the water-bearer. So the god in the relief is awakening the pineal gland, so-called third eye or crown chakra, in the age of Aquarius, which is said to begin in 2012. Assuming that is correct, then the relief is a literal prophecy of the future carved in stone. Since we know the Elohim will take a leading role in these events, then it should be appropriate that the gods in the reliefs are depicting the Elohim. If that is the Anunnaki, then the portrayal is incongruous from how I would expect the human-looking mammalian hybrids to look. Perhaps these reliefs are showing the Anunnaki in question. They are reminiscent of the Greek gods in appearance. How did these nuclear wars affect our ancestors? I mean, what were the long-term effects, if any, on the body of the black man and woman? This reminds me of something usually associated with the Anunnaki, the object called Nibiru, which some describe as a planet-sized spaceship. You've indicated that it is currently in an orbit between our Earth and the Sun. Is it an artificial object? If so, what are its functions and what is its role at this time? There is another similar object in our solar system, the Saturnine moon called Iapetus, which also appears to be artificial, another work of our ancestor. If it is, what is it used for? http://www.enterprisemission.com/moon1.htm. On a related note, I am curious about the structures found on the moon and especially on Mars. On the moon, could you briefly explain how it was separated from the Earth 66 trillion years ago? On Mars, and the region NASA scientists call Cydonia, are various intriguing structures, from the so-called face to the mountain-sized pentagonal pyramids. http://www.enterprisemission.com/sheep.htm. Do you know the reason why these sites and monuments were built? The massive pyramids are similar to your descriptions of the 12 pyramids used by our first ancestors on Earth, which the Dagara/Dogon call the Koronot. Since the 12 are on Earth now, have they ever been discovered or, given their shape and size, are they now mistaken for natural mountains? Like this one which archaeologists believe they've discovered in Bosia, of all places, http://www.philipcoppens.com/euro_pyrs.html. Let us speak of the future, i.e. the imminent end of this age. Our people at this time are in dire need of our knowledge and sciences which you have carefully described in BlackRoots Science. In your book, you've given hints about teachers coming alongside yourself to reinitiate us into the new society that is to come. In explaining the second aspect of resurrection, you revealed that certain individuals have gone through this experience. You mentioned two of them, Jesus, Yesu, and Elijah. Do you mean Elijah of the Old Testament, 1 Kings 17? What of Enoch, Genesis 5? He's supposed to have also ascended to heaven in a similar fashion to Elijah. Are there any other ancients who have resurrected in this manner within the past 6,000 years, excluding the 60,000 Elohim? If that is the case, then it follows that these same resurrected individuals will take a major role in preparing and helping the soon-to-awaken black people who will be the new judges of our nation through the same resurrection process already described. If that is correct, then we should expect their return in 2010, which is when the minds and bodies of the new judges will be ready. The locations of the two highly charged magnetic places are where Lemuria and Atlantis used to be, but are not caused by them. They are purely natural phenomena. Lemuria and Atlantis were centered in those locations because the people knew a way to use those magnetic effects for the purposes of their industries. They used them as a source of energy instead of the oil or gas that are used today. They were able to control these magnetic effects using pyramids and crystals. The stone carvings are most likely depictions of the Anunnaki. It's hard to tell without going into an in-depth investigation. But it's extremely unlikely that they are depictions of the Elohim. There are no such stone carvings on Earth that I'm aware of. Now, the Anunnaki were indeed light-skinned as you thought. The reason they may have been depicted as black people could be just a simple one of familiarity, i.e. the same reason that whites depict a white Jesus and black Africans depict him as a black man, etc. It may be the case that those carvings were used in some rituals that the people learned from the Anunnaki, such as the one you mentioned about rekindling the pineal gland. Since the Sumerians were black people, it would make sense that they carved the Anunnaki gods as black people in order to use their images in rituals. There were many such rituals that sprang up everywhere after the ETs left the Earth that were used in remembrance of them or as a source of power, etc., exactly as still happens today among many native people who carve representations of their own gods and demigods. This is common where the purpose is other than to depict an accurate rendition of historical facts. On the question of the nuclear blasts, there were indeed localized serious effects. You will find them reported especially in Hindu/Sanskrit literature, where they talk about people's flesh, eyes, and tongues falling out, which are clear after effects of nuclear detonations. Even though they were long-term effects passed to future generations, they have since died out. Remember that this nuclear war occurred almost 4,000 years ago. Nibiru is a natural planet that has been modified in such a way that it can travel across space like a large spacecraft. It's not an artificial object in the sense of being built from scratch. It's a modified large planet that used to wander across the heavens unattached to any solar system. If you were to get on it, it would appear to you just like an Earth. The technology involved in its modification is far, far beyond anything known by modern people. And yes, it belongs to the Elohim, not the Anunnaki. Almost nothing is known outside the tight circle of initiates about the fact that the Elohim actually originated from Earth and used to come and go openly among the Israelites in ancient times. But the rumor of the presence of gods always spreads far and wide. Since the Anunnaki were the most commonly known gods to have lived on Earth for an extended period of time, some of the activities of the Elohim that are rumored are mistaken for those of the Anunnaki. So when modern people decipher the writings of the Sumerians and other ancients, they assumed that the only gods to live in that area were the Anunnaki. And so Nibiru is associated with them, when in actual fact that is not at all the case. There are several small artificial moons near Saturn that belong to the various extraterrestrial groups. Some of them are large metallic objects, hollow on the inside, that they use as their main bases in our solar system. They manufactured them to resemble rock moons so that modern telescopes will not be able to tell the difference. The structures on Mars, the pyramids, were left there many thousands of years ago when the entire population of Earth left to live there temporarily. This happens sometimes at the end of the 700,000-year period when all the 24 elders have ruled the Earth, and the Earth is about to be cleansed using large and severe natural catastrophes. Depending on how intense the earthquakes are expected to be, the whole population will migrate off the Earth and settle temporarily on another planet in our solar system. The last time such a mass migration happened was over 700,000 years ago. The population is deliberately reduced until only 144 million people are left. Then they take some animals and plants and seeds and store them in large pyramids and build a covered city on another planet where they live until the Earth becomes habitable again. These storage pyramids are the source of the legend of Noah's Ark. The pyramids and other structures you see on Mars were constructed at that time, many thousands of years ago. The original 12 pyramids that our first ancestors used to come to Earth no longer exist. This happened 78 trillion years ago. Many, many other pyramids have been built and have disintegrated since then. The moon was separated from the Earth by a natural process of nuclear fission that was enhanced by large bombs. This type of nuclear fission goes on all the time deep inside the Earth. It is partly responsible for the heat that causes the Earth's magma and volcanoes. 66 trillion years ago, at the end of one of the 700,000-year cycles when the people had migrated off the Earth, scientists decided that it was time to separate the moon from the Earth. It became necessary for our Earth to have a moon for reasons that I may go into some other time. So they placed large bombs deep inside the Earth to accelerate the natural fission. I use the word bomb for lack of a better word. These are very advanced devices that can penetrate to a precise depth inside the Earth before detonating. These bombs triggered a massive fission process in the area that is now the Pacific Ocean floor. Before, there was no Pacific Ocean. All the Earth that was there was propelled as hot lava 250,000 miles into space, and after a long period it solidified and became the spherical moon. The area it vacated on Earth was a large hollow that soon filled with water and became the Pacific Ocean. Elijah and Enoch have indeed been resurrected into the bodies of resurrection like Jesus, as have the other 6 Mahdis, including Farid Muhammad. All of them are with the Elohim, and will come with them when Yahweh returns to reclaim his earth. I have a question, Brother Africanroot. Can you recall who the 24 elders are? Also, something you said sticks deeply on my mind and it makes the understanding of love so fruitful. It is when you define the statement, love your neighbor as you love yourself, whereas, to love your neighbor as yourself. Two similar statements but all so different. The latter being the most beautiful thing I have ever heard. I can feel the power of such a mental and heartful act. To love thy neighbor as thyself. A key misunderstood for centuries. A powerful and detrimental one at that. Thank you for the clarification. Also, how can one who is not conscious carry out such an act and still be gratified with its wholeness? Do one first have to be conscious fully, or do she only have to be conscious of the act? The 24 elders and the 144 chiefs are known by their eternal names. All we black people have eternal names, which is the name of our first self. But in this 6,000-year cycle, only the 24 elders and 144 chiefs retain their true names. They are the only black people who have not lost their original long-lived bodies we all had more than 6,000 years ago. I don't know their eternal names, and I've never seen their faces either. The two elders of my tribe are called by us Are Botswana, father of the Chwana tribe, and Ma Botswana, mother of the Chwanas. The 22 other elders are called similarly according to their tribes. On true love, or mind and heart unity, it can be experienced by anyone even if they're not yet fully conscious, because it happens in stages. The last or full stage can only be experienced when one is fully conscious. But the stages before that have been experienced by many people. There is a certain state of consciousness that comes when a person is in the company of his or her beloved and feels as if time stands still. All they are aware of is each other. Both of their minds and hearts are so connected that they can each feel what the other is feeling. With some people they get so close that they can almost read each other's thoughts and finish each other's sentences. This happens to many people, as you probably know. That's the first stage of divine love. The more often the people enter into this type of harmony, the closer they come to full divine unity. With the proper ritual, this state can be directed so that it becomes full mind and heart unity. But even without rituals, it can approximate the real thing very closely when the people truly love each other. I have been so touched by reading your posts. I thought when I was younger that I would never find the truth, but I have found it and I am so glad. How do you feel about global warming and the bees and animals dying and becoming extinct as we near the end of this cycle? About global warming, there is indeed some of it, but that is not the point. You see, whites are very clever at deflecting attention. The point is that there is pollution caused by them all over the world. Now when they argue about global warming, that gives them the opportunity to say it could be caused naturally. That is partially true, because indeed some of the Earth's warming is natural, as it comes in cycles. But again, that is not the point. The point is that they are destroying the Earth with their pollution, mental and physical. This is not debatable. It's a clear fact that everyone can see. Look at all the rivers, the air, the soil all polluted, not to mention the noise and mental pollution they export to the whole world with their loud engines, their TV, movies, magazines, and perverted lifestyles. All the pollution on Earth is a result of their so-called civilization. So they try to deflect this by arguing about global warming. The biggest devil in this regard is Al Gore. He is distracting the whole world from the real problem, while he flies around in his jet increasing the pollution. And he gets a Nobel Prize for it. Talking about global warming instead of pollution is like someone getting hives from contact with peanuts, then arguing about whether the hives are making him sick and what he should do about them. His problem is not hives, that is just the symptom. His real problem is peanuts, and he should stop eating them altogether so he won't have to worry about hives. It is not global warming but pollution that is destroying the Earth's ecosystems as well as the useful animals and insects such as bees. And the pollution is caused by the non-blacks, including the deceivers such as Gore who go around the world screaming about global warming. Say to them, stop the pollution and global warming will cease to be a problem, if it was. The destiny of Yaqub. Part 1. Yaqub was born in 4770 BC. He was an only child. He was introverted, preferring to spend time alone with his thoughts rather than in the company of other children. But at the same time he was not lonely. He had a very creative imagination and was always inventing new games and toys for his playmates. Although he preferred his own company, he nonetheless had many friends. Other children wanted to be around him. He was very intelligent and entertaining, and very pleasant to be with. In order to please both the requirement of being with some other children who demanded his friendship, and to also have time for himself, he trained himself to sleep very little, even as a young boy. By the time he was 11 years old, he slept for only 5 or 6 hours a day, which was enough for him, whereas most other children would sleep the full 8 to 10 hours a day. He spent the extra hours each night deeply involved in his own thoughts. He thought about every conceivable thing that entered his imagination. No thought or subject was taboo to his mind. He was comforted by the privacy of his own thoughts, believing that in that realm no one could intrude. By the time he was 14 years old, he had thought about and solved many of the psychological problems that still plague most youths, concerning the dynamics of friendship, child-adult relations, and the place of a child in society, and so on. In other words, all the problems that lead youths into the state of rebellion against adults and society that comes with adolescence. By the time of puberty, he had discovered the power of his inner self, and was already at peace with his position as an individual growing up in a highly sophisticated culture. He had no reason to indulge in those acts of rebellion that many others his age felt a need for in order to establish their power and position as members of a community. It was this very calm composure that actually led him to go much deeper than any youth before into diagnosing the state of his culture at that time, and as it had been throughout history. He had total respect for the wisdom of his teachers and parents and other adults, and yet at the same time he felt that his inner power was soon to overshadow all that he was being taught. He patiently learned all that the customs and rituals of his tribe presented to all youth, while strongly feeling that when his time came, he was destined to change all of it. He felt this calling of destiny to the very depth of his marrow. He met his soulmate for the first time when he was 9 years of age. He had been told about her when he was 6 years old, but had not had the opportunity to meet and play with her as was customary with most soulmates, who grew up with each other right from childhood. She lived in a distant town. Her nickname was Matesai, which means Miss Manners. She was a very serious, orderly young girl, always chiding her friends when she thought they were misbehaving. She was the exact opposite of Yakub, who was a free spirit, concerned only with the essence of things and not so much the details. So she provided a side to him that was missing, and he to her as well. All the original ideas that Yakub came up with, it was Matesai who filled in all the necessary details. They were ideal complements of each other. Matesai was 2 years younger than Yakub. They reached puberty at the same time when Yakub was 14 and she was 12. They had sex for the first time that year, at the end of their rites of puberty. It was during this first sexual union that Yakub's mission of destiny congealed and became crystal clear in his mind. He and his soulmate achieved loving unity of mind at the climax of their physical union. Their minds became one, and all that was missing in his ideas and inspirations was suddenly fulfilled and clarified as a result of the love that bonded them close. When the climax subsided, both of them were completely changed. They had grown so much in mind and heart in that one moment, and the transformation from childhood to adulthood was so total that many people swore that even their physical features were different. Their stature certainly changed. They now walked as two who no longer speculated or heard, but knew. The people of the town had indeed expected that these two, as the leaders of their youth regiments, would indeed excel in their rites of passage from youth to adulthood. This was always the case with the boy and girl who became regiment leaders, the one for the boys' regiment and the other for the girls. But what happened to these two took even the teachers by surprise. 9. It is usually the case, but not always, that the regiment leaders of each year are soul mates, and after their initiation they are expected to marry and begin their training to eventually become co-leaders in some capacity in the tribe. But in the case of Yakub and Matesai, when their initiation was over, the teachers called a tribal meeting and announced that the tribe should not expect for these two to become their future leaders. They announced that the gods had other plans for them. They were to engage in something so sublime and new that had never been seen before in the history of the tribe. This was quite exciting news, something that had never been heard before. There was a great anticipation built up all around the towns, as people had no idea what this new thing was that was to come to their tribe. They had no idea that it would affect not only their tribe, but the whole world. Yaqub and Matsai were married several months after the end of their initiation festival of puberty. Their wedding festival was one of the most well-attended in their region, coming close to that of a prince and princess, and all this due to the anticipation about their unknown mission. Shortly after their wedding, Yaqub and Matsai began recruiting followers. They started teaching a new doctrine one never heard before. Essentially, they taught that the way of life of their ancestors throughout their entire history had been one that had limited the people's freedom. They shocked the people with this new teaching, claiming that the peace and prosperity their ancestors had known throughout all history was due to the fact that they were not allowed to express their total freedom to create. 13, he claimed, and proved to those who would listen, that there were certain realities in our imagination as well as our bodies that were deliberately suppressed by the leaders, especially the 24 elders. He said that the elders were responsible for and were the custodians of all that was taught in the initiations, hence they had the power to withhold certain realities from the people, realities that if they were known, the people would clearly see that what they thought of and took for granted as their freedom was not truly so. It was a form of oppression whereby they were denied the knowledge of certain aspects of the mind and body. This denial of knowledge, he said, guaranteed that there would always be peace. He asserted that the peace that came from this form of subtle oppression was not a true peace. He had the knowledge, he told them, that if revealed, would upset this peace and expose its weakness. The majority of the people, when they heard this new teaching, turned their backs on Yaqub and Matsai. They replied, "What do we want with a teaching that would replace peace with chaos, goodness with evil? We are not interested in such a teaching. We are perfectly satisfied with the teachings of our ancestors that the elders gave to us as a free gift out of their own love. If indeed there are things that must be prevented from manifesting in order to guarantee our peace and the peace of our descendants, then we have no qualms with their prevention." But there were a few who were curious. They asked him, "What are the things that you say are hidden in our minds and bodies that, if allowed to come out, would disturb our peace? We are certainly curious to know, and will follow you to find out." When the number of people who followed them had reached 60,000, Yaqub and Matsai took them to the island of Pelin. The first child to be born on the island was a dark brown boy. He was born to Yaqub and Matsai when she was 16 years old, and he was 18, about 2 years after their arrival. Although the child was very dark brown, his skin was still a contrast to the skin of his parents, who were pitch black in color. Part 2. Now, to understand the answer to your question about why Yahweh and the Elohim went to Sirius, put yourself in the place of Yahweh as he was growing up. He was called Yaqub, which means big-headed. He had a large brain, and all of it was occupied with bringing mischief to the world. Imagine being the very first person to bring murder and mayhem, violence and hatred to the whole world, in fact not just the world, but the whole universe. Imagine being the very first one to do this. Your mind has to be completely saturated with this thought and your determination be at such a high pitch where you hardly think of anything else. You are born into a world of love and peace, where sin, murder and violence are completely unknown. You must bring these things into the world for the very first time. What must the people think of you? They think no less than that you are Satan, the evil scientist. That's exactly what they called him, the evil scientist who will bring death and mayhem and totally destroy our peace. And what do you think is going on in his mind when he hears all this talk about him? Since he was determined, nothing could sway him from his mission. It was his destiny. He can only think, well, if your peace can be destroyed, then it's not worth much. It should be destroyed. With a mind like that, he could not concern himself too much with love and peace, especially during his early manhood when he began to recruit his followers. Perhaps in time when he matured to be an old man, he would grow wise and realize that nothing can surpass or supplant the peace and love of God, which is eternal. But there was no guarantee that he would reach such a level of wisdom given the nature of his mission. Now, in all honesty, Yaqub was not an evil man. He was a very determined man. He had determined in his mind to test the love of God. He concluded that the reason people lived in love and peace, and knew nothing else other than love and peace, was because they had never been exposed to evil and ignorance. He reasoned to his followers, and convinced them, that if they could be exposed to sin and error, the nature of evil itself would overpower the nature of good. He told his followers that the leaders were surely afraid of evil, and would do anything and everything in their power to make sure that evil never rears its ugly head on earth. He said that they used their power as full gods to suppress the emergence of evil because they were afraid of its power. He claimed that if given a chance, evil could overcome good. And he concluded, if that is the case, then evil, not good, is the true nature of God. And if the elders truly knew that not to be the case, then why will they not let evil come into the world so that good can prove itself? This was a very convincing and logical argument, and it gained him enough followers that he was able to launch his mission. Of course, there were many, many more who opposed him than those who followed him. But he had the minimum number of 60,000 volunteers that was necessary to begin that which was his destiny. Even though Yaqub berated the leaders, they remained totally neutral to his teachings. Yaqub did not know he was a child of destiny, but the elders knew. They knew every detail of his mission, and had even prepared the road for him over the previous 44,000 years before he was born. He knew nothing of this at the time. This was how it should be, because his determination was completely genuine and honest. Remember that even though the lives of all people on earth are ruled by destiny, they are nonetheless genuine and brand new. The newborn people themselves know nothing of their destiny. As soon as a soul is conceived, she is separated from the knowledge of the elders, who are the only ones who know the destiny of every soul. To them, the future is history. But to the souls themselves, life is pure and brand new, totally and completely genuine. Hence when the thoughts of evil ran through Yaqub's mind, to him they were original thoughts, genuine and unpretentious, and were being formulated for the first time in the mind of any man. The elders, on the other hand, are the culmination of perfection. They have reached the level of peace that Jesus described as the peace that passeth understanding. There is nothing on earth that can disturb their peace. Hence they were able to take Yaqub's rebellion in stride, and were not in the least ruffled by it. They know the end from the beginning. When it is said that there was a war in heaven between good and evil, this war did not involve God at all. God, in the person of the 24 elders, is always above the tension of opposites. God is the reconciliation of opposites. So we have heard of how this story of Yaqub was depicted in ancient literature as the war between God and his rebellious angels led by the evil Satan, and that God cast the rebels out of heaven. It is true that the elders cast Yaqub out of their society and banished him to an island. But the reason for it is not that God was angry at him. They did it so he could go about his mission undisturbed. There was just too much opposition from the ordinary citizens of heaven, the peaceful society, that Yaqub could not have succeeded had he tried to establish his ideas in their midst. The best alternative was to cast him out of heaven and banish him to the island of Pelin, where he could carry on with total authority and with the full loyalty of his followers. This background information will help you to put yourself in his place and to imagine his state of mind and his determination to do the undoable, his willpower to achieve that which had not been achieved throughout all past eternity. Such a state of mind can do no other than unfold a great sense of power in the person. Here he is, poised to overcome that which all people and all gods throughout eternity have maintained is the unassailable and true and only state in which God can exist forever, i.e., the state of goodness. He is certain that he is about to overcome goodness with evil, and show the whole universe that goodness, love and peace are weak in the face of sin, evil and turmoil. Imagine such a mind. Also bear in mind that he had this type of mind all his life. He discovered the possibility of evil very early in life, when he learned about the tension of opposites. As the story has been told before, he was playing with magnets as a young child when this revelation came to him. He discovered the opposite polarities of a magnet. Given his great intelligence, it did not take long for him to realize that this tension of polarities also exists in people. As he progressed in his studies, and all his teachers were greatly impressed by his unusual intelligence, unusual because remember he was one of the new people, the majority of whom had their native intelligence corrupted by self-isolation for 44 millennia before the time of Yaqub. As he studied further, especially when he went into the study of genetics, he discovered that the bodies of his ancient ancestors had a genetic perfection that naturally suppressed the emergence of this tension of polarities. He discovered that their genetic structure was so perfect that the tension he observed in the negative and positive poles of a magnet could not manifest at all in the negative and positive of their genes. The positive pole of their procreative genes, the black germ, was in total and complete dominance over the negative pole, the light and recessive germ. This negative pole had no opportunity of ever manifesting in their bodies. He thus came to the conclusion that it was because of this suppression of the negative by the positive that gave good its power over evil, and caused peace to prevail over chaos throughout all past eternity. He reasoned that if the negative polarity could be given just as much leeway as the positive, then the recessive light germ would rule the dominant dark germ forever. All of these conclusions he reached before he was 21 years old. He was only 16 when he and his soulmate and their followers migrated to the island to begin their mission. He was a true child prodigy and a born leader with a natural charisma, an incredible sense of power, as well as a natural gift of oratory and logic. That was the type of mind that existed in this god. 30. So he decided in his mind that he was going to become the new god, the one that will overthrow the God of eternity, the God of goodness. It was in this state of mind that he went to Pelin to breed a new race of people that would rule us. And he would be their God, thus making him the God of the whole universe, because his creatures would conquer all black people. When you have a mind such as his, completely saturated with this thought, and living at a time when we no longer have the benefit of the 7 great rituals of the black nation, then it is inevitable that you will continue along that path indefinitely. Your view of reality is circumscribed, being overshadowed by your intense desire to prove your point. And the intensity of his desire was so strong that nothing on earth could turn it around. For it to be turned around, he had to go off our earth and be exposed to another point of view, one that he could not know here on earth because of the conditions of self-forgetfulness. It was for this reason that he had to live on Sirius, a perfect earth and society that his ancestors had known here ages before he was born. Only in that way could he be exposed to a vaster reality than that which had saturated his mind all his life. But this exposure to a larger worldview had to wait until he had exhausted all the possibilities of his mind. In other words, he had to live a full life on earth with complete freedom to finish his mission. God loves all black people the same because we are all the incarnation of God. There is no possibility that any black person will go astray so far that he could become irretrievable. This was the direction that Yaqub was headed in, and the elders knew his only salvation lay outside of our earth, back at the home of our original ancestors. Here on earth he would experience a lifetime full of the possibilities of evil and sin, and on Sirius he would experience a lifetime of the power of love and goodness. Then and only then could he come to a fair conclusion about which system of life was superior. That is why he and the rest of the Elohim went to Sirius. Part 3. This brings me to the other important part of your question. Why did they have to occupy the bodies of the gods of Sirius? Why could they not occupy the bodies of resurrection of the 144,000, then travel to Sirius? The reason has to do with the power of the mind over the body. The thoughts that Yaqub and his followers had in their minds that led them to make the evil races had the power to negatively influence their bodies to such an extent that they could take this influence into the bodies of resurrection. Their ideas were so powerful at that time they had the full initial momentum of the 6,000 years that were to come that they would easily have influenced their bodies of resurrection, especially in the critical period of the first 40 days when the bodies are highly susceptible. Such a detrimental effect that could be caused by the power of their thoughts on the susceptible bodies would make it difficult, if not impossible, for the individual to unite with the first self. The bodies of their twin souls on Sirius, on the other hand, cannot be affected. For one, they do not have the susceptibility of the bodies of resurrection, and secondly, they have minds that are fully mature and pure. Even the powerful thoughts of Yaqub cannot displace the power of truth known by the gods of Sirius. Although on Earth his ideas were the most powerful, on other planets where the ancients live a perfect and natural life their power was really infantile and immature. Their thoughts were given great apparent power and stature because our true power had been suppressed and corrupted for 44,000 years. Yaqub's concept was powerful enough to make him God on earth and God of his creatures. But it was not nearly enough to overthrow the eternal power of goodness that abounds across all of creation. It was a light shining in darkness, where even a dim light appears bright. When lifted up to the brightness of the sun of eternal truth, its dimness becomes obvious. To the rest of our kin in the universe, Yaqub's talent did not lie in his ability to cause evil to overcome good. It lay in his creative power. He created a new type of creature that God had been yearning to experience for all of past eternity, that no soul before him had been willing to bring to reality. This was a creature that would spend the rest of future eternity without the knowledge of absolute perfection. It is essential for God to experience this also, because it is a part of her being. Thus there came a time on the island when all these realizations finally emerged in Yaqub's mind. He reached the completion of his initiation and a level of wisdom that made him realize the true nature of his mission, that it did not lie only in him being God of the universe. He already was that, as is every black person. That is our heritage, unassailable and unchangeable. There is no one we must fight or overcome to realize this heritage. It is ours simply by virtue of our self-existence. The true talent of his mission, he realized, was as a creator, not as Lord of the universe. We came into the universe to create unique and everlasting creations, and such is Yaqub's creation. With this realization, his name changed. He was no longer called Yaqub the Big-Headed, the father of mischief. His name became Yahweh, God of the non-blacks by virtue of his creativity, and God of the Israelites by virtue of his patriarchy. He is the first patriarch of Israel, their true father. 40 days and 40 nights. Why? Especially in the Bible, but also in some folklore. This concept is you have heard of the concept of the 40 days and 40 nights. Important in initiation rituals. The 40 days and 40 nights are not metaphorical as some people claim who try to give it some esoteric meaning. This is a literal time period of initiation called the temptation. Every person who is being considered for a certain level of initiation here on earth will live through a time period lasting for 40 days during which he or she will be tested or tempted as it says in the Bible. It is an essential part of initiation, and no would-be initiate can continue to the next level if she does not pass the test. This test was famously passed by Jesus during the time when he spent 40 days and 40 nights in the wilderness or in the mountain. The wilderness can indeed be a literal physical wilderness wherein the initiate spends time alone, and is tested and tempted only in her mind using spiritual visions, as was the case with Jesus, or it can be a temporary condition of living that she endures for the set period of time until a decision is made as to whether she has passed the test or not. As there are varying degrees and levels of knowledge, there are also varying levels of initiation. Those highly gifted people, who are commonly called the chosen ones, such as the 7 messiahs, do undergo a spiritual, mental, test involving visions, while they are alone in a secluded place. Their minds are so much more developed over and above the minds of regular initiates that they are tested much more severely on the highest level. They are indeed well prepared for the more intense type of test, and it has never happened in all of history that any of them has failed to pass the test. This level of testing that the 7 messiahs underwent is very close to the level of initiatory experience that the ancients went through prior to 6,000 years ago. Although the depth and breadth of knowledge is not the same, the ancients had a total of 49,000 degrees of knowledge, whereas the highest initiation of this age is limited to only 360 degrees. Nevertheless, the intensity of the experience is very similar to what the ancients went through. Also, in ancient times, as it is today among the 7 messiahs, no one in all history has ever failed the 40-day test. Such was the thoroughness and perfection of preparation that no person would be subjected to the test period if they were not 100% ready to pass it. In contrast to those perfect initiates such as the 7 messiahs and all the ancient gods, there are other initiates who are initiated on a lower level. Now, there are many among them who excel on this lower level to such an extent that, at the end of their trial period, they come out being well nigh equal to the highest of initiates. Although they are not equal to the messiahs, they are so close that any differences, any shortfalls, would be noticeable only to the highest of the high, such as their teachers, custodians, elders, and so on. Below this excellent group who are only a step removed from the messianic initiates, there are many others who also pass the test well enough to be able to become highly qualified teachers, tribal elders, historians, healers, and such as are needed by their societies. Then finally, below this third group of initiates, the last group that is able to pass the test are actually those who fail it. Such a one was the man known as Malcolm X. As I stated earlier, all would-be initiates below the level of the 7 messiahs are tested under different circumstances. Their wilderness is not a place of seclusion where they are alone with nature and their minds, far away from common society. It takes place right in the middle of society, in circumstances that force them to make the same choices and decisions that high initiates have to make in seclusion. Their circumstances are such that they are never aware that they are in the 40-day trial period. In fact, many of them are tested before they are formally approached by a teacher, and as such are not conscious of the fact that they are potential initiates, although they are aware on a deeper level that they are living a life very similar to a life of initiation. Their whole life seems to be ordained to such a level that deep down they are aware that they are on a mission that is larger than that of ordinary people. The life of Malcolm X is indeed a perfect example of a man on such a mission. As I said, there are many who have succumbed to the temptations of the devils and have failed the test. Indeed, the devils are used as the tempters of the initiates in this age. This is not a metaphorical statement. It is literal, meaning that the devils, the non-blacks, are used by the powers that be to tempt the initiates and try everything in their power to sidetrack them, if not to completely turn them around. After Malcolm had lived his highly dramatic, intense life and was ready for the next stage, he was led by circumstances to enter into his trial period. The life of an initiate-to-be is not necessarily dramatic and intense as was the case with Malcolm X. It can be an outwardly quiet-seeming life, although the inner life is always intense. Every initiate-to-be experiences an intense inner life of spiritual questing, agony, and questioning at one time or another. That is what determines the intensity and readiness, not the outward circumstances that are visible to all. Malcolm's trial period began on the day he decided to enter the world of the white Muslims. This happened on his pilgrimage to Mecca, known as the Hajj. It started on Sunday, April 12, 1964, the day he announced at a rally that he was leaving for a trip abroad, and ended 40 days later on May 21, the day he arrived back from his trip. The white Muslims were the devils who became his tempters, and subsequently, his conquerors. It was these very same devils who suggested to him that he should go on the pilgrimage. They rationalized that his views of white people as devils were myopic in the sense that he had never been exposed to true Muslims, those in Arabia, especially in Mecca. By going to Mecca, they said, he would surely change his views. That thought percolated in his mind for some time until the events of his suspension from the Nation of Islam. At that point, instead of taking his suspension in stride for what it was a test of his loyalty, his ego got the better of him. It was then that he decided to go on the pilgrimage to see for himself whether white people were devils, or whether the whole thing was a lie fabricated by Elijah and Fard Muhammad. Now, the temptation during the 40-day trial takes on different forms for different people, depending on their circumstances. But there is one facet of it that is common to all trainees, and that is when the devil shows the trainee all the kingdoms and riches of the world and offers them to him. This is always the final temptation, and if the trainee succumbs to it, he fails the test. 10. This happened to Malcolm when he met the man he calls Omar Azam, who showed him the riches of the kingdom of Arabia that totally awed Malcolm. His awe was great. As he said in his own words, he felt like he had never felt before in his life. He was in the presence of a relative of the ruler of Arabia, and was totally awed by him. He said, "I had never been so honored in my life." Not even the time he had met Elijah for the first time was that a greater honor, nor when he was promoted to be minister of a temple, nor even being graced by the very presence of the Messiah Fard Muhammad when he was in prison. None of that was a greater honor than being in the presence of the royal devil, the ruler of one of the world's evil kingdoms. He reached a point of no return there and then, and the devil had completed his conquest. Malcolm X thus failed miserably to proceed to the next stage of his initiation that would have catapulted the struggle of our people in America and all over the world to a new height. He set the movement back a few decades and increased the suffering of our people an inestimable amount. All that happens on earth is preordained. To state the facts and conditions of initiation as I have done here concerning Malcolm X is not to condemn him. He acted out his preordained role that he himself preordained before he was born. The object of the test of initiation is not to test God, which of course the devil tries to do, meaning God the first self, but rather to test the personality of God that has incarnated as Malcolm. By this test, and by failing it, he delivered unto himself and unto the black nation the experience desired by all who took part in it. The only determinate matter of choice and the reality of preordination comes with the concept of time, wherein an individual's choices can either prolong or shorten our suffering. This is the only avenue where we as new personalities have a choice. We can act in such a way as to end our suffering today, or extend it till the end of the age. Only the beginning and end of the cycle is set in stone. As to when an individual or people decide to end their own suffering and that of others is our own personal choice. We can do it today and then see the rest of this age wind down to a close from a position of liberation, or we can prolong our suffering right to the last minute. It is all up to us. Black people have absolute free will, which takes effect prior to time, and time, our incarnation, is used to experience the life ordained by that free will. So we write our lives before we live them. Our existence is not an experiment, neither is it an evolution, spiritual or otherwise. We live to experience that which we already know. And since all knowledge is the glory of God, we live simply for the glory of God. Hence our choices as black people can neither be judged nor condemned. Every black person will ultimately have his 40 days and 40 nights. Each will endure the trial, knowingly or unknowingly, to pass it or to fail. If she fails, then she will repeat it in Yahweh's heavens, and pass it there. Then and only then does she become an initiate, a master of knowledge, and will see heaven's glories open up, and the angels of God sing his or her praises. The Messiah and the anti-Messiah. Whenever a Messiah comes to the earth, there is always an anti-Messiah who comes at the same time to oppose him. This has happened 7 times, and will happen one last time when the greatest Messiah, Yahweh the King of Messiahs, comes. As you already know, there is an anti-Messiah waiting for an opportunity to appear to the world. You already know his name. And you also know this fact: the Messiah is always black, and the Antichrist is always non-black. The lack of understanding of this phenomenon of the Antichrist is the cause of all the arguments about the racial identity of the Messiahs that have come in the past. This applies to all 7, because the coming of each one was accompanied by the coming of a white false Messiah. By white I mean non-black. So when whites say Jesus was a white man, or that Muhammad was a white man, they don't know it, but they are actually referring to the Antichrist and not the real Christ. It is inevitable that whenever they search historically for the Christ, they will always find the Antichrist, because the Christ is never bestowed on them, but is bestowed on the black nation. The Messiah, every time he comes, is always God's gift to black people, never to the white races. So when black people search diligently also, they will always find the real Messiah. Hence there is this phenomenon where black people hold on to the fact that every Messiah that ever came was a black man, and the non-blacks always oppose, insisting that he was white. This disagreement will never be resolved until the truth is known about the phenomenon of the simultaneous appearance of the Christ and Antichrist. Many people, especially in the Christian and Muslim worlds, believe that the appearance of the Antichrist is a one-time event that is yet to come. They don't know that it has already happened 7 times, and will happen again one last time. When you understand this phenomenon, then you'll understand why the true racial identities of Jesus, Muhammad, and Farid are obscure, some insisting that they were black, some that they were white. The fact is they were both, because there were two versions of each, one being black and real, the other white and false. So black people who worship a white Jesus and a white Muhammad in the mainstreams of these two religions are actually worshiping the Antichrist and don't know it. Let's talk first about the Antichrist that opposed Jesus, that came at the same time as him. As always happens, the Antichrist takes the same name as the Christ, or a name so similar that future generations who study external history will not be able to tell them apart. In this case, he was also called Yeshua ben Yosef, Jesus son of Joseph. His father's real name was Manasseh. He was renamed Joseph at the time that his son was chosen to be the Antichrist. As well, the son was renamed Jesus exactly for the same reason, i.e. to maximize the deception. It shall be so also that when Yahweh comes, the false Messiah will call himself Yahweh, Allah, Christ, Mahdi, etc. Now, the lineages of all the children of Israel right down to the present-day African Americans are kept in the Book of Life by the Elohim. In a similar way, the angels of deception, the extraterrestrials, also have their Book of Life in which they record the lineages of their chosen people. These chosen people are chosen by them on the basis of genetics primarily, because they represent the best types of genes among the non-blacks that these extraterrestrial races depend on for their survival. When it comes time for them to anoint their false Messiah, they choose a person who is as close as possible to the lineage of the true Messiah, but who happens to be non-black. They cannot anoint a black man as an antichrist for two reasons. First and foremost, no black person's first self would agree to such a role, and secondly, since their goal is to deceive mainly the non-black races, they stand a much better chance using one of them. The lineage of the true Jesus, which is an all-black lineage from Abraham, and before, all the way to Jesus is given in Matthew, and Jesus was the 40th generation counting from Isaac the son of Abraham. The lineage of the false Messiah is given in Luke. The two lineages are as follows. The lineage of the true Messiah. 1. Isaac. 2. Jacob. 3. Judah. 4. Phares. 5. Esrom. 6. Aram. 7. Amminadab. 8. Nazon. 9. Salmon. 10. Booz. 11. Obed. 12. Jesse. 13. David. 14. Solomon. 15. Rehoboam. 16. Abia. 17. Anna. 18. Josaphat. 19. Joram. 20. Ozias. 21. Jotham. 22. Achaz. 23. Ezekias. 24. Manasseh. 25. Ammon. 26. Josias. 27. Jeconias. 28. Salathiel. 29. Zorobabel. 30. Abiad. 31. Eliakim. 32. Azor. 33. Sadak. 34. Achim. 35. Eliud. 36. Eleazar. 37. Mathon. 38. Jacob. 39. Joseph. 40. Jesus. The lineage of the false Messiah. 1. Isaac. 2. Jacob. 3. Judah. 4. Phares. 5. Esrom. 6. Aram. 7. Amminadab. 8. Nazon. 9. Salmon. 10. Booz. 11. Obed. 12. Jesse. 13. David. 14. Nathan. 15. Mattatha. 16. Menon. 17. Maliah. 18. Eliakim. 19. Jonan. 20. Joseph. 21. Judah. 22. Simeon. 23. Levi. 24. Mattat. 25. Joram. 26. Eleazar. 27. Hosea. 28. Air 29. El Modem. 30. Kosum. 31. Adi. 32. Melchi. 33. Neri. 34. Salathiel. 35. Zorobabel. 36. Risa. 37. Joanna. 38. Judah. 39. Joseph. 40. Semei. 41. Mathathias. 42. Math. 43. Nag. 44. Esli. 45. Naum. 46. Amos. 47. Mattathias. 48. Joseph. 49. Janna. 50. Melchi. 51. Levi. 52. Mattat. 53. Heli. 54. Joseph/Manasseh. 55. Jesus. You will notice that the lineage of the false Messiah diverges from that of the true Jesus at the 14th generation after King David. David had 4 sons by Bathsheba, including Nathan and Solomon. Nathan's son Mattatha had a son named Menon by a non-black woman. The descendants of Menon gravitated towards their non-black ancestry and married non-blacks. By the time they reached the 8th generation from Menon, in the time of Mattat son of Levi, the black germ was entirely absent from them. It was completely removed in the 7 generations preceding Mattat when they married only non-blacks. So from Mattat son of Levi all the way to the renamed Joseph and his son Jesus, the false Messiah, a total of 32 generations, they were all non-black, whereas from Abraham, and before, through Solomon all the way to the true Jesus, they were all black. Thus the true lineage of Jesus is the one that goes through Solomon and not through Solomon's brother Nathan. During the 3 years that Jesus preached and taught his disciples, the false Messiah also gathered a following and traveled in the same area, teaching his own doctrine. Remember that in those days there were no newspapers, radio, or television. So it was easy for him to live a parallel life, teaching his false doctrine of a spirit God. After Jesus died, the false Messiah continued teaching. His false doctrines were adopted by the Roman government, which used them to establish the Catholic Church. He became more famous than the real Jesus, and when people talked about the Messiah in those days, they were talking about this white man. This white Jesus later married and they gave birth to children. He married a woman named Mary, but this was not Mary Magdalene, the black woman who was close to the true Jesus. This other Mary was a white woman. 31 years after the death of the real Jesus, the false Jesus also died. His sons and their mother Mary moved to Europe while he was still alive and lived in Greece for a while. As the years went by, his lineage grew, and some of his descendants left Greece and moved to what is now France, which was called Gaul then. They became the rulers of that region and gave birth to the line of French kings called Merovingians. This line of kings later ruled England under the name of Stuart or Stuart. The present-day rulers of England, the Windsors, also claim descent from this same bloodline. These families all claim that they are the descendants of Jesus, the true Messiah. Such is not the case. They are descended from Jesus, the son of Manasseh, a white man and a false Messiah who was married to a different Mary, a gypsy white woman. The true Jesus during his time was known only by a few white people. He traveled mostly among the black population. But even in the Roman Catholic Church that formed later, there were some who knew the true Messiah. Hence you have 2 representations of him in the ancient art of the Church, one type showing the true Messiah as a black child and black Madonna, while the other shows him as a white child and white Madonna, even a white Christ on the cross. The image of the non-black Christ naturally became predominant right up to this day because it was promoted by non-blacks. The whole purpose of the white Antichrist is to maintain and reinforce the supremacy complex of the non-black races, which they need for as long as they rule the world. What happened in Jesus' time happened again in the time of Muhammad. There were also 2 Muhammads, one a black man and the other a white man. There was a time in the latter part of Elijah's life when there was great turmoil in the nation of Islam caused by the dissension of Malcolm X. Elijah then told his dissenting ex-followers that the man they were following was a white man, the founder of Orthodox Islam. Yet previously he had taught that the Muhammad of the Quran was a black man. Many people are still puzzled as to why he would make such an obvious error. Now you understand that this was not at all a contradiction. The Muhammad that he was referring to that is responsible for white Islam was indeed a white man. He was the Antichrist of his time. Elijah could not talk as yet about the phenomenon of the Antichrist. It would have caused too much confusion. Also, at the beginning of the movement there was another Antichrist present who was opposing Farid. Elijah could not talk about any of these things. The story of the white Muhammad is told very succinctly by Malachi Z. York. You can read the entire story if you look it up under the Story of Muhammad by D. York on the internet. Keep in mind that even though this story was divinely inspired and accurately recorded by York, there is much that he wrote on other matters that was inaccurate, inspired by deceitful beings that he allowed to gain access to his mind. In summary, the history is as follows. Muhammad was born as Ahmad in 570 AD. His name was changed to Muhammad by his grandfather when he took him as a boy to the Kaaba, their symbol of veneration. His father was Abdullah, his mother Amina. Abdullah was the son of Abd al-Muttalib, who was a descendant of Kedar, the second son of Ishmael, son of Abraham. His parents died when he was a child, and he was raised by his uncle Abu Talib, brother of his father Abdullah. He, Muhammad, had a daughter named Fatima, and his uncle had a son named Ali. Ali married Fatima, and this made him the next in line to succeed Muhammad as the first Khalifa upon Muhammad's death. But as you will see, the Antichrist had other plans against Muhammad's family, deposing Ali and enthroning his cronies in the Caliphate, whose descendants to this day claim that they are the descendants of the real Muhammad. These are the white Arabs that rule Islam today. The true descendants of Muhammad from the tribe of Quraysh or Quraysh are black people. Some of them settled in the Sudan to escape the persecution of the followers of the false Muhammad, and they took the original Quran with them, where it is still kept safely in their custody. About 22 years before Muhammad's birth, a white Arab boy was born in the same region, named Musaylimat. This Musaylimat was to become the Antichrist to Muhammad. When his time came, he changed his name to Muhammad, which means prophecy fulfilled, and he destroyed copies of the Quran and replaced them with his own Quran. He also created the Sharia, which are oppressive man-made laws added to the Quran, just like the Jews made up the Talmud and added it to the Tanakh. Musaylimat was the son of Habib al-Hanafi. He had an advisor named Waraka, together with whom they proceeded to change the original Quran and replace it with their own, being helped by Jewish scholars and Jesuit priests of the Catholic Church. This is the same Quran that is read today by Muslims all over the world. Musaylimat planned the death of Muhammad by having him poisoned. He and Waraka tried to tempt Muhammad into forming an alliance with them. He refused, and they plotted his death by sending a Jewish woman called Zainab to serve him poisoned meat during a feast. He ate a little of it, then realized it was poisoned. He did not die immediately, but the poison affected him so much that he could not recover from it. He died 3 years later in 632 AD. Musaylimat, with the help of a man called Abu Bakr, who was then ruling, collected all the copies of the real Quran after Muhammad's death and burned them. They killed the 7 men who had memorized the Quran. Then they replaced it with copies of their own which they distributed throughout the Muslim world. It is the same Quran used by Muslims today. The original Quran, which was written on dried animal skins, was taken by the family of Muhammad to Sudan, where it remains today. Now, in the time of the last Mahdi, Farid, there was a white man, a false messiah, whose mission also was to destroy everything that Farid was building, especially the nation of Islam. This man's name was Ford. He was a convicted criminal, and you can still see his picture today, because those who like to discredit Farid like to present the picture of this white criminal as the real Mahdi. The true picture of Farid is the one that Elijah shows of him holding the Quran. The other is the picture of his opponent, the seventh Antichrist. You can see how closely they resemble one another. Although with the past messiahs there was no resemblance with their opposers, this time it's made possible by the fact that Farid was himself the son of a white woman. This was a necessary condition for him to succeed in his mission. The extreme racism of his day, having been quite overt, would have precluded him from infiltrating the white system to learn all that he had he been a purely black man. It was this that made it possible for the false messiah, Ford, to pass himself off as Farid in this modern day of photography. Thus the devils have sent a false messiah every time a real messiah has come to black people. They will do this one last time, then Yahweh will come, and that will be their end. Protocols of the Elders of Shabazz. Black people are forming independent, self-reliant communities all over the world. Some are fairly large, such as the one that moved to Israel under the leadership of Ben Ami. Others are very small, consisting of only a handful of people. The small ones will eventually merge with others and form larger communities with their own land, farms, businesses, and all essential services. Many black people realize that the economy of the white man's world has reached a point of no return in its demise. It is so riddled with corruption and greed that it cannot be restimulated. It will self-destruct and a new economy will replace it. Black people, especially African Americans, will be the key to this coming new economy. The elders of the new community of black people that is soon to come have given the protocols to be used by the new communities. Yes, there are elders involved in this transition, and their wisdom is unsurpassed. They have advised that the new communities that are being formed must have protocols that will guide them. These are the protocols I will outline here. They are not a complete legal system to guide every detail of the communal life. Instead, they provide the backbone that is necessary for each community to succeed. Once the foundation is in place and is adhered to, the other details can then be governed by laws formulated locally according to the needs of each one. The protocols of the elders of the black community. This is a community of peace. The members live at peace with one another. Anyone who brings discord to another brings discord to the whole community. If found guilty of bringing discord, he will be banished from the community for 1 year. If found guilty of a second offense, whether similar or not, he will be banished for 3 years. If found guilty of a third offense, he will be banished permanently. This is a community of prosperity. All the members are expected to contribute as much of their productive energy as possible to the community. They are encouraged to invest as much as possible in community projects designed to provide necessary products and services to their members. They are expected to spend as much of their money as possible in the community's businesses and services. All members must donate 10 cents out of every dollar of their income to the community. This is a community of responsibility. All members are expected to work for the maintenance and improvement of the community. Anyone who refuses to work for the community or contribute to it in another way will be banished for 1 year, 3 years, and permanently on successive offenses. This is a community of families. All children who reach 18 years of age within the community are expected to marry within 5 years, by their 23rd birthday. All single adults 18 years or older who join the community are expected to marry within 5 years of joining. All who marry are expected to bear and or adopt black children within 3 years of getting married. All childless married couples who join the community are expected to bear and or adopt black children within 3 years of joining. Any married couples who refuse to bear and or adopt and raise black children will be permanently banished from the community. Only members deemed by the family committee to be too old or otherwise incapacitated are exempt from the marriage and family laws. This is a community of black people. All adult members are expected to marry black people. Anyone who marries a non-black will be banished from the community for as long as he stays married. If he divorces, he may come back to the community and bring his children if he has custody. But his mixed-race children will not be allowed to marry other mixed-race children. They may marry black people who are not mixed race, or remain single. If they remain single, they are the only people so allowed. If they remain single, they are not allowed to bear or adopt and raise children. If they marry black people who are not mixed race, they will be expected to bear and or adopt and raise children according to the time schedule already discussed. Black people who are already married to non-blacks when applying for membership will be refused membership unless they divorce. Anyone who contravenes these rules of marriage and family will be banished from the community. This is a community of unity. All the smaller communities are encouraged to join together into a larger community, obtain land, and live together in complete self-reliance. Enforcement of the protocols. This is a community of law and order. The community will choose 12 members, 6 men and 6 women, who are deemed the wisest and most experienced, to be the judgment committee. They will be voted into office by mature members, at least 14 years of age, who have been members for at least 6 months. They will vote 12 times, not all at once but consecutively, one member at a time. The person with the most votes in the first round of voting will be the committee leader, the second to be chosen will rank second, the third will rank third, and so on down to the 12th, who will rank as the last and junior member. They will hear evidence for charges brought against any member, ask questions, and make a judgment. When 8 or more vote for guilty, he will be found guilty. When less than 8 vote for guilty, he will be found not guilty. Each committee member will make an independent decision. When all the evidence has been heard and the time has come to make a judgment, each judge will take one object from a bowl of 12 red identical objects and a second object from a similar bowl of 12 blue objects. Then he will enter a secret chamber alone and place one of the 2 objects in the voting container, a red object for guilty or a blue object for not guilty. He will then place the remaining object in the storage container next to it. The 2 containers will be made so that he can insert his vote without seeing or touching the other objects already placed therein. After all the judges have cast their vote, the committee leader and 2 other judges will bring the voting container and the storage container into the main chamber and open them in front of all present and count the objects. If the red objects in the voting container are 8 or more, the defendant will be found guilty. If they are 7 or less, he will be found not guilty. The judges are forbidden from ever discussing their vote with each other or with anyone else. They will not discuss their decision before or after the casting. The judge's verdict is final. There will be no appeal. Anyone found guilty of interfering with the secret nature of casting the judge's votes, who tries to compromise the anonymity, will be permanently banished from the community. If such a person is one of the judges, a temporary judge will be chosen by the others to replace him. If the defendant is then found guilty, the temporary judge will permanently replace him. His or her ranking will be the last and junior member, and the others' rankings will be raised accordingly. If found not guilty, he will be reseated to his position, and the temporary judge will vacate his seat. Only in this circumstance will the judges choose one of their own. In any other circumstance that a judge needs to be chosen, she will be chosen by popular vote of the mature members as described before. All the other committees such as the Family Committee, Wealth Committee, Work Committee, Health Committee, etc. do not have the power of judgment. They will take their accusations, evaluations, and evidence to the Judgment Committee. Only the Judgment Committee will make judgment on the banishment or non-banishment of members. These protocols apply more especially to large communities of dozens of people, but may be modified for small communities of only a handful. We black people are a common-sense people. We will find and apply the spirit of the law when it is not possible to apply the letter of the law. Each community will ultimately have a judgment committee and other necessary committees, each one consisting ideally of 12 members, 6 men and 6 women. The smallest community can be as small as 2 people dedicated to helping one another and their people, and to finding other like-minded black people, or it may be as large as 14,000 people, which is the maximum number of people in each community who can form a real town and live together in complete self-reliance. So black people who have formed independent communities, as well as those who intend to do so, whether those communities are large with hundreds of people or small with only a handful, are all advised to use these protocols. They will help to stabilize the new community until it becomes mature and self-reliant. Email the protocols to all your friends and contacts. They are part of an ancient system of rules for forming a new society, modified especially for African Americans and others of the diaspora.